Now these are some animals that have made scientists' lives rather difficult. They're called Tapejara and Tupandactylus, two very closely related species. It was once thought that Tupandactylus was actually a species of Tapejara, but more recent morphological studies show that they're actually a separate species. But there was also a third, classified as another species of Tupandactylus. More recent studies suggest that the third species was actually a female Tupandactylus. If that's the case, it would show that this species is actually sexually dimorphic, with males being larger and having a significantly more decorated head. But this theory isn't 100%, so take it with a grain of salt. Either way, both Tapejara and Tupandactylus bear some of the most impressive head crests anywhere in the animal kingdom. And as with most fanciful crests, it was likely used with mating rituals. And females would most likely want males with a brighter and larger crest. Talk about a certified freak. When talking about tanky dinosaurs, you'd be remiss to not include Euoplocephalus. These guys, as you might have guessed, are related to Ankylosaurus, meaning aside from their underbelly, these guys are covered in armor from head to toe. As you may have heard, yes, even their eyelids have armor. Now, my guy Yui isn't the biggest ankylosaur, but he still reaches a whopping 20 feet or 6 meters, as well as weighing upwards of 2 tons. Some folks theorize that because of how compact and heavy they are, they could swim like hippos. But that has no solid backing yet. So as of right now, swimming like this seems more likely. And despite how long these guys are, they're actually relatively short. An average height human could probably look clear over them. But that was actually useful. Euoplocephalus would have had to contend with tyrannosaurs as their major predators, and their low-slung body put them at the perfect height to deal some damage to the ankles. And I mean, look at this thing, it's basically the dinosaur equivalent of a sledgehammer. Talk about an ankle breaker. Allow me to introduce you to one of the largest raptors in history. This is a Kilobator. Like their cousin the Velociraptor, these guys are from Mongolia, and during their time they would have been one of the top predators. They reached up to 16 feet or about 5 meters long, and they weighed upwards of 500 pounds or about 250 kilograms, placing them as one of the largest dromaeosaurs alongside Utahraptor, Dakotaraptor, and Austroraptor. But a Kilobator isn't your normal raptor. Compared to the rest of the family, these guys are extremely robust. Their arms were relatively short compared to other raptors. They make up for it by having extremely powerful legs. Like Utahraptor, it's assumed that a Kilobator hunted mostly large animals, more than likely using the raptor prey restraint model, which essentially means they hunted by attrition, leaping onto the back of a prey animal and dealing as much damage as possible with their claws and jaws. Then they're just waiting for it to bleed out. Brutal. If you ever wanted a real-life Pokemon, this is probably the closest you're gonna get. Meet the leaf sheep, a species of sea slug. They've also been called the leaf slug and the salty ocean caterpillar. They're part of a family known as Opisthobrynx. Their name comes both from their diet and these little things called rhinophores on their head. But just like Pokemon, these guys have a special ability. After eating plant matter, usually algae, they begin a process called kleptoplasty, essentially allowing them to rob their food of their chloroplasts. Doing so allows them to indirectly photosynthesize, meaning that at least sometimes these guys can make their own energy. Think of it like if you were to eat a battery, but you could still charge that battery after you ate it and then use that energy. Well, that's basically what these guys do. And I'll be honest, I don't care who you are. That is one adorable little Pokemon. Sometimes the future is better left unknown, and this animal is a fantastic example of that. This creature is known simply as the Future Predator. These guys are from a British TV show called Primeval, and if you grew up watching the show like I did, they might have been in your nightmares. These creatures are blind because they didn't really need their eyes. In the show, these creatures are the future evolution of bats, and as such, they use echolocation to find their prey. But just plain echolocation is a bit of an understatement. These guys are so sensitive they could even detect your heart beating. They're also extremely fast animals, capable of reaching over 75 miles per hour. And by far the most terrifying part is their intelligence. These absolute monsters held human levels of intelligence. Not only are they able to formulate and execute plans, but they're also able to second-guess their enemies. While these predators may not be the outright strongest on terms of strength, they more than make up for it with their agility and ferocity. These animals are incredibly horrifying, but they're also incredibly fascinating. Tyrannosaurus rex is known as the Tyrant Lizard King, and today it earns that title a little bit more. New research from a team of Canadian scientists shows us that Tyrannosaurus might actually be far larger than originally thought. The largest tyrannosaur on record is Scotty, weighing nearly 20,000 pounds or about 9,000 kilograms. This new study claims that Tyrannosaurus rex could reach over 30,000 pounds or 15,000 kilograms. If this turns out to be true, it means that Tyrannosaurus rex was almost twice the size we originally thought. But it is worth noting that this is mostly just speculation. This calculation is the maximum size a Tyrannosaurus could reach with its body plan. At the moment, this research remains speculative and there's no solid concrete proof. But perhaps there's a new Tyrannosaur fossil waiting right around the corner. What is a dinosaur? No, this isn't a Jeopardy answer. It's a question I get asked fairly often. So allow me to clarify a few things. Dinosaurs are part of a group of animals known as archosaurs. Archosaurs are a group of reptiles that split off from the rest of their family, and around 250 million years ago, they really began to diversify. As they began to diversify, they split into two major groups, the Pseudosuchia and the Avametatarsilia. Pseudosuchia is a group that contains crocodilians and all of their ancestors, so no, they're not dinosaurs. The other group, known as Avametatarsilia, were split into two, the dinosaurs and the pterosaurs. Despite both being part of that group, pterosaurs are still not dinosaurs, but rather their closest cousins. Crocodilians are kind of like the cousins once removed. And as far as lizards, snakes, and even mosasaurs go, none of those are very closely related to dinosaurs. A vast majority of those aquatic reptiles belong to a group known as Squamata, which is the same group that snakes and lizards and their relatives are all a part of. So the only real dinosaurs in this day and age are birds. This has been a PSA from your friendly neighborhood dinosaur man. So I'd like to start this video off by saying that I love cats and they're adorable and amazing animals. But a majority of the world has a major issue with cats that no one wants to acknowledge just because cats are cute. And that's the fact that outdoor and feral cats are an extreme danger to the environment. And there are very few exceptions to that. If you happen to live in an area where cats are native, like Northern Africa, then yes, you can let your cats outdoors because they would fit well into that ecosystem. Aside from one or two other locations, cats are not native to anywhere else on Earth. So in places like both North and South America, most of Europe, and Australia, they are an incredibly invasive species. And that's not even everywhere cats are invasive, those are just the worst ones. Those of you that still allow your cats outside despite them not being native are legitimately damaging the ecosystem. In the United States alone, both domestic and feral cats kill an estimated 2 billion birds a year, if not more. And that's not even to mention the billions of other mammals they kill. In Australia, this problem is so bad that upwards of 20 species have gone extinct since feral cats were introduced. And because of this, in Australia, certain laws have gone into effect that prevent people from having outdoor cats, as well as allowing people to kill outdoor cats. And you might think that's harsh, but you wouldn't if it was a rat. And that plays into a big part of this problem, which is people at home who own the outdoor cats. Surveys have concluded that many of these people feel some level of cognitive dissonance towards this topic. Many folks believe that their cats being outdoors isn't harmful to the environment, which is just flat out wrong. And as many of you know, cats will tend to bring you gifts when they hunt something. And many cat owners praise their cat for killing wild animals outside, which if you hadn't guessed was bad for the environment. And other folks are aware of the environmental concern but disregard it because they believe their cat's welfare is more important. Firstly, your cat's welfare is not more important than the welfare of the environment. Secondly, it's actually better for your cat to keep them indoors. Cats are a domesticated species and they do not require time outdoors. It has been proven time and again that outdoor cats can be retrained to live inside if the owner puts the effort in to get them trained. If you insist on your cat going outside, they should only be doing so in a harness or a leash or inside of a catio. And many studies have also proven that indoor cats have a significantly longer lifespan than outdoor cats. On average, an indoor cat's lifespan is about 15 to 20 years. In contrast, outdoor cats have a lifespan of about 2 to 5 years on average. But the root of this problem all comes back to owners. For those of us who own cats, it is our responsibility to ensure that they do not go outside and damage the ecosystem. What I'm trying to say is I get it. Cats are adorable and you want to let them do whatever they want, like go outside, but I'm trying to explain that this is bad for the environment. If this keeps going on this way, the United States may end up creating laws that allow cats to be culled, and no one wants that. So really, this comes down to you, each individual person. Stop letting your goddamn cats outside. One of the most famous dinosaurs of all time is without a doubt Allosaurus. The largest of their species could get over 30 feet long, nearly 10 meters. And they weighed nearly 3 tons. Allosaurus is one of the most successful dinosaurs in history, accounting for over 70% of all theropods in the Morrison Formation. They owe this success to a number of specialized features. One of these are extremely long and hook-shaped claws. They would use these claws much like eagles use their talons to hook into and grapple prey. Allosaurus didn't have incredibly powerful jaws, but what they did have was the ability to open their jaws incredibly wide. Despite not having stronger jaw muscles, this would still allow Allosaurus to deliver a series of wounds with its knife-like teeth. After their prey was killed, they'd use their hands and feet to hold down the carcass while pulling back, similar to modern birds of prey, earning them the nickname the groundhog. Combining all that with the fact that Allosaurus had decent binocular vision as well as was capable of running 20 to 30 miles per hour, no wonder they were so successful. One of the most terrifying things to come from dinosaur media recently is the Plague of Madness. This plague comes from a show called Primal, and it's an incredibly dangerous disease. It works very similar to a zombie virus in that it only takes one bite to infect a living being. After becoming infected, the creature goes through a horrifying process in which it dies. Well, everything dies except their central nervous system. But that doesn't mean it feels pain, in fact, quite the opposite. They will go to unreasonable amounts of lengths to kill anything they see. And it pushes its host's body far beyond what it would normally be capable of, allowing an Argentinosaurus to jump. The plague also gave them unnatural levels of durability, allowing them to shrug off blows that would normally kill any other creature. And again, very similar to zombies, they only have one true weakness, and that's their central nervous system. A nearly invincible and insane killer dinosaur? Yeah, count me out. I don't want any part of that. I mean, my God, just look at this thing. What was the largest carnivorous dinosaur? If you've been following me for a while, you probably already know the answer. The three contenders are these guys: Spinosaurus, Giganotosaurus, and Tyrannosaurus rex. In science, size is measured by weight, which is why a blue whale is significantly bigger than any sauropod. This has been a large debate amongst the dinosaur community as a whole, but scientists don't really have this debate, because other than the odd man here or there, most of them agree. Current measurements for Spinosaurus put them at about 46 feet in length, or about 14 meters, and 7 to 8 tons. That's pretty big, that's respectable, no doubt. Current estimates for Giganotosaurus put them at 43 feet, or 13.2 meters, and 8 to 9 tons. Also very respectable, and if you know me, you know Giganotosaurus is my favorite dinosaur too. Current estimates for Tyrannosaurus rex put them at about 42 feet, or 13 meters long, and up to 10 tons. That is, quite a bit bigger. So unless new research comes out that upscales Spinosaurus or Giganotosaurus or downscales T-Rex, currently T-Rex is definitely the biggest carnivorous dinosaur. Meet the inspiration behind the Loch Ness Monster. These guys are part of a family known as plesiosaurs, more specifically elasmosaurs. Elasmosaurs are relatively large creatures, with Elasmosaurus itself weighing up to 2 tons and being 34 feet long, or about 10.3 meters. Elasmosaurs as a group have some of the longest necks in history, proportional to the rest of their body. In fact, an elasmosaur known as Albertonectes has 75 neck vertebrae, the most of any animal yet known. However, contrary to popular belief, elasmosaur necks aren't all that flexible. You've probably seen plenty of pictures of these guys with their heads raised above the water, like Nessie. I'm sorry to be the one to tell you that their necks aren't actually flexible enough to do stuff like this. But regardless of that fact, these guys are amazing swimmers. And plesiosaurs in general were likely fairly fast animals. They're definitely some of the most interesting animals I've ever researched. And I feel like I shouldn't have to say this, but they're not dinosaurs. Plesiosaurs are part of a family known as Sauropterygia, and their closest living relatives are turtles. The more you know. This dinosaur is known as the shield bearer. These guys are known as Jacopil, and they're not very big dinosaurs, only about 5 feet or 1.5 meters long. And they wouldn't have weighed very much either, only about 10 to 15 pounds or 4.5 to 7 kilograms. These guys are basal members of a group of dinosaurs known as Thyreophorans. Thyreophora is the group that would eventually give way to Eurypoda, which would be like stegosaurs and ankylosaurs. Similar to many of their other later relatives, these guys would have osteoderms running along their sides and back. As opposed to their four-legged cousins, these guys were bipedal, a trait they kept from their earlier ancestors. Them being a Thyreophoran has been disputed, however. Some have claimed that it's an armored basal ceratopsian based on its jaw anatomy. Others believe it may represent a new family of ornithischians. But until further studies are done, it's still considered a basal Thyreophoran. But no matter what family this Argentinian dinosaur belongs to, these guys look awesome, don't they? Like a little armored bird dog thing. The dinosaurs may be gone, but some ancient creatures still exist today. This animal is known as the alligator gar, and it's one of the largest species of freshwater fish in North America. Gar can be traced back over 100 million years to the early Cretaceous. They've retained a lot of features from their ancient ancestors. One of those traits is a swim bladder lung, which allows them to breathe in both air and water. Another ancient trait that alligator gar possess is a double row of teeth. These guys are usually ambush predators, lying in wait until something comes within striking distance, and using their double row of teeth to snatch up whatever unlucky prey item was close by. Alligator gar have a special type of scale called ganoid scales. The insides of these scales are actually made of bone, and the outside is covered in something called ganoin. Ganoin is like a harder form of tooth enamel, and it makes these guys' scales almost impenetrable. Oh, and most of these scales are also serrated, so they've got that going for them too. The largest alligator gar on record was over 8.5 feet or 2.5 meters long and 330 pounds or 150 kilograms. These powerful ancient predators can definitely be intimidating, but I'm glad more and more folks are seeing that they're actually vital to the ecosystems that they're native to. A monstrous creature evolved directly from T-Rex, this is Vistatosaurus rex. These guys are a fictional tyrannosaur from Peter Jackson's King Kong. And boy, you better be glad they're fictional, because these things are horrifying. Despite many similarities to their ancestors, over 66 million years these guys have developed some notable differences. Their heads are far more dense than any tyrannosaur, and they have many more teeth as well. Their skin is also very armor-like, allowing them to be essentially bulletproof. They also have a gap between the hip and the ribcage that allow them an extreme degree of flexibility for an animal of their size. Speaking of size, though not by much, these guys exceed their prehistoric counterparts, reaching up to 50 feet long or just over 15 meters. These were the true apex predators of Skull Island, with their only rival being Kong and his species. However, after Kong's departure and death, they became the undisputed rulers of Skull Island, where they'd get a chance to earn their name, the Ravager Lizard King. Did you know that Jurassic Park's Robert Muldoon had a much different fate in the novel than in the movie? Muldoon is one of the most famous characters from the original Jurassic Park. His death was iconic, and it came with one of the most memorable lines of the movie. Clever girl. But in the novel, things turned out much differently. He actually survives all the way until the end of the book and has some incredible accomplishments along the way. In the novel, Muldoon has a rocket launcher instead of a shotgun, and he blows up one of the raptors and blows the leg off another. He's also accidentally responsible for the Tyrannosaur's death in the novel as well. At one point in the novel, he hits the Tyrannosaur with a tranquilizer, which takes quite some time to go into effect. The Tyrannosaur just so happened to be chasing prey in water when the tranquilizer took effect, and she ended up drowning. Oh, and he also gets stuck in a drain pipe for a while, but that's not his best moment. And despite fighting raptors, tyrannosaurs, and overall risking his life over the course of the novel, he manages to survive until the end. Oh, and he's got hair in the novel, including what's described as a steel gray mustache, and I'd assume that's a pretty big mustache knowing Muldoon. Meet one of the largest carnivorous dinosaurs. This animal is known as Tyrannotitan. These guys come from early Cretaceous Argentina. Their size has been up for debate ever since they were discovered, and right now it currently rests in between a few numbers. Current estimates for Tyrannotitan put them at between 40 to 43 feet, or 12.2 to 13 meters, and about 5 to 8 tons, or 4.8 to 7 metric tons. So no matter what, they're still a fairly large animal. They're part of a family known as Carcharodontosaurs, and they're related to other giant dinosaurs like Mapusaurus and Giganotosaurus. And they may even possibly be an ancestor to Giganotosaurus themselves, or just a basal member of their family. If you'd like to see how Tyrannotitan stacks up against other carnivores, check out my latest full-length video out now. Okay, controversial hot take. These things, the Neurognathids, they're not cute. Not at all. They're like the frickin' porgs in Star Wars. They're not cute either. I don't trust anything with eyes that big in comparison to their face. I mean, just look at this thing. You know it's plotting something. There's evil in those eyes. You can see it. This dinosaur's name literally means big nose horn face. Despite the roasting from those who named it, these guys' common name is Nasutoceratops. This species was recently popularized by the Jurassic World movies. These guys are basal members of a group of ceratopsians known as centrosaurines. Nasutoceratops has the largest brow horns of any centrosaurine, up to 40% of the skull, meaning their brow horns could reach up to 3.5 feet long. And their large nose is actually a fairly unique trait. They have something called pneumatic nasals, which is a unique trait not shared with any other ceratopsian so far known. We still aren't entirely sure of their function, but there are two leading theories. One theory is that this chamber could have been used to help cool off the brain of the animal. My favorite theory out of the two is that inside their nasals they would have had soft tissue, which would allow them to make noise similar to elephant seals. But as always, as we continue to learn more, our understanding will grow and expand. And perhaps someday soon we can learn for sure what that big nose was for. Meet a tyrannosaur known as a powerful terror. This dinosaur's name is literally Dynamo Terror. These guys lived in the early Cretaceous about 78 million years ago in what is currently North America, around Colorado and New Mexico. These are fairly long creatures, reaching about 30 feet long or 9 meters and weighing around 2 tons or 1.6 metric tons. And there's a chance that that's not its full size. The specimen that we currently have may have been from a subadult rather than a fully grown individual. In 2020, a paleontologist named Chang-Yu Yun claimed that Dynamotera was a nomen dubium. But in 2021, a new specimen was discovered and assigned to Dynamotera, but it hasn't been described in detail yet. With this new specimen, Yun's claims are likely invalid, and it may actually teach us more about the original specimen. Perhaps this powerful terror is even more terrifying than we originally thought. Dr. Alan Grant is the main character of the original Jurassic Park, and despite Sam Neill's amazing portrayal of the character, he's still quite a bit different in the novels than in the films. In the novels, Grant is described as a barrel-chested, bearded man of 40. He and Ellie are not involved romantically in the novel. In fact, she's just his student, and he had a wife that died many years prior to the events of the novel. But despite these differences, just like the film, he gets to display his paleontology knowledge quite often. He's the one who confirms that dinosaurs are breeding on the island when he discovers a velociraptor eggshell. Grant also gets what's probably the best solo scene in the whole novel. At one point, he gets cornered by velociraptors in Dr. Wu's laboratory, 3 of them. Equipped with the knowledge that most small carnivorous dinosaurs likely ate eggs, as well as the fact that most of them likely have a chasing instinct, he was able to use poison to kill all 3 of the raptors. At the end of the novel, he and Ellie deduce that the raptors and other dinosaurs are trying to migrate off the island, and it's very likely that some have gotten off already. Oh, and in the novel, he doesn't dislike kids. In fact, it's quite the opposite. He has quite an affinity for them, especially Tim and Lex once he gets to know them. Either way, both versions of Dr. Grant are legendary characters. Dennis Nedry is the disgruntled project manager of Jurassic Park and is in charge of creating the park's computer systems. In the film, he serves as the primary antagonist, but in the novel, he's actually more of a secondary antagonist. Honestly, Nedry's a lot more human in the books than in the film. In the film, Nedry shut down the park and stole the embryos simply because he was selfish and wanted more money. And sure, Hammond's definitely not the greatest boss in the film, but to say he deserves the corporate espionage is definitely not warranted. But in the novels, it's a whole nother story. When Nedry was first approached by Hammond and InGen, he was asked to design a module specifically for record keeping. Along the way, Hammond and InGen also contracted him to create the rest of the computer system for Jurassic Park. Nedry was always in the dark about the project, never had the full scope in sight, and because of that he was left continually frustrated with all the changes he had to make. Eventually, Hammond and InGen wanted more changes that were not in the original contract as well. When Nedry asked for more money in exchange, they threatened litigations and lawsuits. They also wrote letters to Nedry's other clients, insinuating that he was becoming unreliable. And to stop any more loss on his part, he agreed to their demands. And it's because of this that when Lewis Dodgson offers Nedry $1.5 million to steal the 15 embryos, he eagerly accepts. And just like in the film, he shuts down the park to give himself a wide enough window to steal the embryos and deliver them to Dodgson's guy on the boat. And I'd like to clarify, I'm by no means saying what Nedry did was right. I'm just saying that if you got screwed out of thousands of dollars, maybe even more, then you'd be pretty pissed too. And Nedry still gets his comeuppance and gets killed by the Dilophosaurus in the novel. But honestly, it's a much more brutal death than he really deserved. In the original Jurassic Park, Ellie Sattler is the partner of Alan Grant and also a paleobotanist who works with him. In the novel, Ellie is still a paleobotanist, but she's not romantically involved with Dr. Grant whatsoever. But she still worked relatively closely with Dr. Grant, prompting Hammond to invite her to the island as well. Despite not being romantically involved, her and Alan are very close friends and respect each other incredibly. And for good reason too. Ellie is more than capable of handling herself, and aside from that, she's probably one of the smartest people in the whole novel. I had mentioned previously that Alan had found and identified the velociraptor egg. In the novel, he never would have found that egg if it wasn't for Ellie. If you remember the sick Triceratops from the Jurassic Park film, in the novel that was actually a sick Stegosaurus. In both the film and the novel, the dinosaurs are getting sick from consuming a berry from a plant known as West Indian lilac. The park staff insisted that the dinosaurs weren't eating the West Indian lilac, but Ellie thought otherwise and did some investigating. Turns out, unbeknownst to Hammond and the others, the dinosaurs were consuming gizzard stones, and when they ate the gizzard stones, they accidentally ate the berries as well. And just like in the film, Ellie gets to be the hero that the men won't be. She's able to distract the raptors long enough for Grant, Gennaro, and the kids to get the power back on. She does this by using herself as bait and going outside and banging on the fence to get the raptors to attack her at the fence line. Though it doesn't all go exactly to plan, and Ellie ends up having to run for her life. But her plan worked, and that's what we're focusing on here. Ellie is one of the survivors of the novel, and she ends up going on to marry a physicist later on. You may have noticed that I didn't mention Ellie's appearance at all. And that's because the only real difference appearance-wise is that Ellie in the books is much tanner than Ellie in the movies. If you like this video, make sure to check out the full-length one using the link in my bio. In Jurassic Park, Henry Wu is the man behind the dinosaurs. In the first Jurassic Park film, Wu doesn't have a giant role, but he is the chief geneticist. In fact, a good chunk of Wu's original lines went to Mr. DNA. Wu survives the first film and ends up going on to be much more of a mad scientist in the later Jurassic World film. In the novels, Wu was approached by Hammond after the funeral of his mentor. His mentor had always called Wu the best geneticist in his lab, and as such, Hammond offered him $10 million a year. Wu took the job, and after years of research, he managed to recreate the dinosaurs. But later on, Wu became disillusioned with his own work. Wu's belief that he was in control drove him to the point that he even believed he could make better versions of the dinosaurs. And that alone really goes to show the arrogance that Malcolm was talking about. In Malcolm's own words, they stood on the shoulders of geniuses and took the next step. He has these amazing skills, but doesn't know how to use them properly, and that's partially the reason why the park fails. Wu unfortunately starts to have doubts about the park a little too late in his life. After helping Grant get the power back on, he goes to get Ellie back inside the building. As he's attempting to do so, he gets yanked out the door by a velociraptor and split down the middle. As the raptor began to eat Wu, he was still alive, feebly pushing its head away from his intestines. So in the book series, Wu didn't get to live long enough to become a megalomaniac villain. Don't go full mad scientist. You never want to go full mad scientist. If you like this video, make sure to check out the full-length one using the link in my bio. Ian Malcolm, much like Grant and Sattler, is one of the big three main characters of the original Jurassic Park. He's meant to serve as the voice of the audience throughout the novel, similar to the movie. The only real difference of appearance is that Malcolm in the book is balding, versus Malcolm in the films is definitely not. Malcolm is a rather enigmatic personality, and he's very pessimistic about the park as a whole. And I think the best part is that he's actually not really opposed to the idea of Jurassic Park, he's opposed to Hammond's methods. In the novel, Malcolm makes it very clear that he doesn't trust Hammond. He believes that Hammond and Wu are foolish and don't fully understand what they're trying to do. Throughout the novel, he points out Wu's and Hammond's flawed methodology. The whole dinosaurs can't breed thing didn't sit right with Malcolm, which is where we get this famous line.
That life, finds a way.
In the novel, he expands upon this by explaining that there's way too many unpredictable factors. Before I continue, let's just take a moment to appreciate Jeff Goldblum. This is one of his most iconic characters, and I doubt anyone could have played him as well as Goldblum. Being a kid meant Alan Grant was your favorite, but being an adult means that Ian Malcolm is your favorite. Unfortunately for this brilliant character, for most of the film and the novel, he's incapacitated. In the novel, after watching the Tyrannosaur throw the kid's car, he runs in a panic. The Tyrannosaur ends up chasing him, biting down onto his leg, and tossing him like a rag doll. In the film, this occurred slightly differently, and that's once again thanks to the wonderful Jeff Goldblum. He thought it would be a better idea that instead of Ian running away scared, that he actually tries to help Alan and save the kids. Which is why he gets his very heroic moment in the Tyrannosaur scene of the movie. Malcolm ends up spending the rest of the novel ranting about science and philosophy, and he helps to explain to the reader the complexity of the chaos that has unfolded throughout the park. Unfortunately, at the end of the novel, it's said that Malcolm dies of his injuries, but Crichton retconned that for the second novel, per request of Spielberg, and thus the legend of Malcolm got to continue. The creator of Jurassic Park is none other than John Hammond. In the films, Hammond is a rather likable character, often compared to Walt Disney. But you may be surprised to learn that he's actually considered the main antagonist of the novel. In the films, he's portrayed like a sweet old man who just wants to bring the joy of dinosaurs to the whole world. In the novel, that's just his public persona and what he shows to characters like Alan Grant. And throughout the novel, we learn that this isn't the case and that Hammond only cares about money. In fact, the only reason he starts the Jurassic Park project so late in his life is to shore up his legacy and make as much money as he can before he dies. There's a point in the novel where he discusses with Wu other bioengineering companies like InGen. He explains that many of them are attempting to help mankind by doing things like curing diseases. He said that he personally would never use bioengineering to help mankind because it's too much of a risky business and he doesn't want to risk those profits and government regulations. Throughout the entirety of the novel, Hammond takes no responsibility for any of the issues that come up with the park, instead blaming them on other people. The novel version of Hammond would have sacrificed his grandchildren to the dinosaurs if he thought it would make him more profit. And like many villains, Hammond got what he deserved. After most of the conflict had ended and the park was mostly settling down, Hammond went on a walk. While he was on this walk, Tim and Lex were in the control room messing around, and they found a button that played a Tyrannosaurus roar. This roar ended up terrifying Hammond, causing him to dive into the nearest foliage. Doing so causes Hammond to fall down a hill and break his ankle. And as he's trying to get back up the hill, he's found and bitten by compies. The compies in Jurassic Park have a type of venom that causes a sense of euphoria in its victim. And after the venom got into Hammond's system, he basically let the compies eat him. And I know it sounds kind of gruesome, but Hammond honestly deserved way worse. Don't be a sociopathic megalomaniac, kids. This is a terrifying oceanic hunter known as Predator X. These guys belong to a group known as pliosaurs, and Predator X may be the largest one. This species could be 10 to 12 meters in length or 33 to 39 feet. And at that size, with their body plan, they likely weighed more than 10 tons. These guys would have been one of the top predators in the late Jurassic seas. And I know, when you're looking at this thing, you must be thinking, didn't sci-fi already do a dino shark already? Because I mean, this thing definitely looks like a cross between a crocodile and a shark or a dinosaur and a shark. And trust me, I know what they look like, I have eyes, but their actual closest living relative are turtles. And before you get all mad at me about it, I don't make the rules. Turtle evolution is just weird. As one of the apexes of its environment, it could eat pretty much whatever it wanted. And in the strongest parts of its jaws, its bite force could reach up to 10,000 psi. If these guys were still alive, I'd be much less inclined to go into the ocean. Did you know that the largest creatures to ever live are still alive today? This may come as a shock to you, but the blue whale is the largest creature to ever live that we know of. The largest of the species ever recorded was 98 feet long, or nearly 30 meters. And they can weigh upwards of 200 tons, which is equivalent to about 440,000 pounds or 199,000 kilograms. Even the average blue whale is about 20 to 25 meters, or 65 to 80 feet. But unfortunately, even being the biggest thing in the ocean doesn't mean you're safe. Aside from humans, the only threat to blue whales are orcas, who will actively hunt and eat even adult blue whales. Blue whales may be the biggest thing in the sea, but they still gotta pay taxes to a dolphin with panda privilege. That shark that jumped in the boat, that's a mako shark. Specifically a short fin mako shark. They're also known by a few other names, such as the blue pointer or the bonito shark. These guys are mackerel sharks, part of the same family as great whites. They're not as big as their cousin, reaching about 13 feet or 4 meters in length and about 1,200 pounds or 570 kilograms. They're also one of, if not the fastest shark in the ocean, reaching up to 46 miles per hour or 74 kilometers per hour. But unfortunately, due to overfishing, this species has been in decline. They're now listed as an endangered species in everywhere except New Zealand, who has done an incredible job of preserving their natural ecosystems in the last few years. The main threat to this species is overfishing by both commercial and sports fishermen. Everyone thinks taking just one will be fine, but when thousands of people are taking just one, it's not fine. Hopefully we can change before it's too late for this amazing species.
There's a group of people that say that dragons were real.
That video goes on to say that dragons had hollow bones and that's why they didn't fossilize. But there's a few problems with that theory. Firstly, while it is much more rare for a hollow bone to fossilize, it's definitely not unheard of or impossible. Many species of dinosaurs, including birds, had hollow bones, and we have plenty of their fossils. Even if they did have hollow bones, there's a high likelihood we would have at least found fragmentary remains by this point, especially considering how large they allegedly were. Secondly, if hollow bones didn't fossilize, we'd have far less bird and pterosaur fossils. Now, I'm not saying it's impossible that they were real, nor am I saying that it's impossible that their bones didn't fossilize. In my opinion, this evidence is flimsy at best. When it comes to horrifying dinosaurs, one of the last places you'd expect them to be is in an Ice Age movie. This monstrous beast is known as Rudy. Rudy is an insanely large albino baryonyx. While his size is up for debate, it seems to me that he's in excess of 100 feet or 30 meters in length. Basically triple the size of a standard baryonyx. And he also comes equipped with baryonyx's incredibly powerful claws. But unlike their real-life counterpart, these claws wouldn't have been useful in fishing. Because of the way they're structured, it's much more likely that they were used for hunting as opposed to fishing. Rudy also has what I like to call malicious intelligence. This creature is smart enough to hold grudges and will track down anyone it has an issue with. But thankfully, Rudy appeared in a children's movie, so we didn't really have to see how horrifying he really could have been. What was the scariest prehistoric animal? In my opinion, I believe that goes to the Azhdarchid pterosaurs. This includes animals like Quetzalcoatlus and Hatzegopteryx. Why are they scary? Good question, but you'll be sorry you asked. Firstly, the largest members of this species could be up to 20 feet or 6 meters in height, with wingspans more than 30 feet or 10 meters long. And despite being able to fly, from what we can tell, their preferred hunting method was on the ground. That's like having the best weapon in a video game but never using it and just carrying it around to flex on others. And I feel like the way they'd end you is just disrespectful. About a quarter to a third of their body is literally just their head, and a majority of their head is made up by an incredibly powerful beak. And they'd use that beak to snatch up any unsuspecting animals. And even if you were suspecting, some of these animals have an estimated speed on the ground of upwards of 20 miles per hour or 31 kilometers per hour. They're like if pelicans got what they actually wanted and were able to just eat anything. So yeah, definitely one of the most terrifying group of creatures in my opinion. This is the largest dinosaur ever discovered in Australia. Meet Cooper. Who's Cooper?
That's Cooper!
Oh right, thanks Dr. Grant. This is Australotitan cooperensis. These guys are titanosaurs, which makes them related to the largest sauropods that ever lived. Now normally by this point I'd give you the size estimate, but we actually don't have one for the species. The authors who originally described the animal purposely left out a size estimate. They did this because it's notoriously difficult to get a reliable size estimate on sauropods, especially when the remains are this fragmentary. Some folks have suggested that they're a similar size to Dreadnoughtus because they share very similar proportions in their bones. If that's the case, they may have been more than 80 feet or 25 meters in length and weigh more than 50 tons. But until we learn more, it's one of the many mysteries of paleontology. Did you know that this dinosaur, the crowned dragon, is actually a tyrannosaur? This is Guanlong, a tyrannosaur from the late Jurassic. These guys are part of a group known as Proceratosaurids, which I completely understand can be confusing, but all the Proceratosaurids are actually tyrannosaurs. Unlike their later relatives, these guys weren't huge, reaching about 10 to 12 feet or 3 to 3.5 meters and about 275 pounds or 125 kilograms. But we've all got to start somewhere, and these guys were some of the earliest tyrannosaurs. Unlike the much more advanced tyrannosaurs, these guys had elaborate cranial displays. These cranial displays were likely mostly used for mating. Their crest is very reminiscent of Dilophosaurus, another example of convergent evolution. While we've only found 2 individuals, we have 1 juvenile and 1 adult, both in relatively complete condition. And hopefully future expeditions in China bring up more of their specimens. Have you ever seen a saber-toothed cat this weird looking before? Aha, gotcha, you goof. That was a trick question because you still haven't. This animal is known as Thylacosmilus, and despite their startling similarity to saber-toothed cats, these guys are actually marsupials, more closely related to things like kangaroos and wombats. These guys are around the same size as the modern jaguar, about 180 to 260 pounds or 80 to 120 kilograms. The reason they look so much like saber-toothed cats is due to convergent evolution. It seems that convergence goes so far as even hunting. Much like many true saber-toothed cats, Thylacosmilus was a heavy and slower animal. They would ambush their prey, using their powerful arms and claws to hold it down while delivering a precise and powerful bite to the neck. It was once thought that Thylacosmilus went extinct due to competition with saber-toothed cats after the Great American Interchange, but more recent studies show that they went extinct during the Pliocene, over 1 million years prior to the Great American Interchange. And as far too common in paleontology, their extinction is one of the many mysteries. Could dinosaurs sing? Don't you love it when memes like this become reality? But it's not in Stegosaurus like in the memes. This animal is an ankylosaur known as Pinacosaurus. This paper by a scientist named Yoshida describes the fossilized larynx of the animal. The study shows that the larynx and other vocal areas were far better developed than previously thought. It shows similarities to both bird and crocodilian voice boxes, meaning they'd be able to produce very bird-like sounds except much deeper. As with modern archosaurs, these guys would have used their vocal tracts for multiple purposes: mating, defense, territorial disputes, either way. And the whole time they'd likely sound like a very big bird. Huh, memes really do come true. The last place you'd expect to find horror is in a children's film. If there's one dinosaur from a childhood film that really exemplifies that, it's the Sharptooth. The original Sharptooth from the first Land Before Time film is a monstrous creature. No official sizes have ever been stated, but it was nearly the same size as Littlefoot's mother, which could potentially put this guy near 60 feet or 18 meters in length. But what's really so scary about this T-Rex aside from its size? Even compared to other members of his species, this particular Sharptooth is incredibly strong, agile, and ferocious. He's durable enough to survive falls from a height that would kill any other creature. He's capable of smashing through rocks and stones with his head. He's capable of jumping high enough to land directly on a sauropod's back. And he's smart enough to hold a grudge. Near the beginning of the film, when he's chasing one of the main characters, they accidentally cause a thorn to go into his eye. That incident made him mad enough to track them throughout the entire film. If all that isn't enough for you, just remember that he's capable of taking on a full-grown Apatosaurus by himself. Don't underestimate cartoons. Tyrannosaurus rex is one of the most powerful predators in history. But some people, like Gendy Tartakovsky, take that a little bit further. This is Primal's Alpha Tyrannosaurus. This monster was an absolute giant, estimated to be between 20 and 30 meters or 65 and 100 feet. While not particularly intelligent, it was still a sadistic animal and seemed to take pleasure out of killing Fang's family. It had incredibly thick scales, so much so that Fang couldn't even hurt it when biting it on the neck. However, it does seem to have some parts of its body where the scales are lighter and thinner. Its powerful tail could send even a large creature soaring through the air. Its jaws were massive, with all the power of a tyrannosaur and more. And like the rest of its pack, it had a large and strange horn on its nose. The horn may have been useful for combat, but we really don't get to see that. This creature is Primal's first true villain, and despite only being on screen for a short time, it shows us how cruel and terrifying that world can really be. Many different animals, even dinosaurs, used armor. This armor is called osteoderms, and it's made out of bone deposits left in the skin. The most common place you might have seen them are on animals like ankylosaurs and crocodilians. They happen to have highly vascularized osteoderms. For crocodilians specifically, this allows them to exchange heat with the ecosystem around them, rapidly raising or lowering their body temperature as needed. But archosaurs aren't the only ones that use osteoderms. Many species of lizards also have their own form of armory protection. This may surprise you, but some species of frog also possess osteoderms. Just like lizards and archosaurs, they use it as a form of defense. But in my opinion, the weirdest animal that have osteoderms today are armadillos. Armadillos and their families and arthrans are the only mammal species that have ever been seen to have osteoderms. And honestly, they use it more effectively than most of the other species. The wonders of evolution. Did you know that these whales have a secret weapon? This is Leviathan, a prehistoric sperm whale. They share many features with their modern counterparts, including a spermaceti organ. This organ gives the animals their name and also allows them to use echolocation. This ability makes the modern sperm whale the loudest animal on the planet, capable of reaching 230 decibels. For reference, a rocket launching into space is only 180 decibels comparatively. And the prehistoric Leviathan may have been capable of around the same. But how is this a weapon? I'm sure we all know how echolocation works, with sound bouncing off an object and returning to create an image. For smaller animals, including things like humans, up to 200 decibels can be lethal. The sounds they're capable of making could literally vibrate you to death. Honestly, that seems more terrifying than getting eaten by the thing. Nature is so messed up in the most brilliant and beautiful ways.
But it's becoming increasingly obvious. I can deny it no longer! I am small.
If you haven't already heard, there's been a size update on Dunkleosteus. Previously, we had believed they reached 16 to 33 feet or 5 to 10 meters. But this new estimate, which uses a much more detailed way of getting the size, shows us a much smaller animal, with the larger specimens reaching just over 4 meters or 13.5 feet. And the meme images that have come from it have been absolutely brilliant. I mean, just look at this thing, it looks like a Sharpedo! Look at the freaking face and the body, it's just too good! And this one is just... I'm sorry, it's just too good. I cannot wait to see what other people come up with. One of the most brutal dinosaur villains is easily Disney's Carnotaurus. We don't have an exact size estimate, but it was at least double to triple the size of a full-grown iguanodon, making them far larger than any carnivorous dinosaur yet known. They're also far bulkier than their real-life counterpart. Aside from that, these guys also seem to have some sort of osteoderms to serve as protection on their skin. And like many fictional dinosaur villains, these guys possess some level of intelligence. Like many predators, they were able to follow their prey to a source of water in times of hardship. But it also held a grudge against the main character and his friends for the death of its companion. Despite this grudge, it was still able to realize when it was outmatched and cut its losses and go for easier prey. They're one clever, brutish dinosaur. The Jurassic Park velociraptors are theme park monsters. But in the more recent Jurassic World films, they've been treated very lightly comparatively. So let's take a moment to remember why they were one of the main villains in the original trilogy. These raptors were huge, about 6 feet tall or 2 meters. They're able to see even when it's pitch black out. They have a pair of 6-inch sickle claws that they use for slashing. And their intelligence cannot be understated. They were able to figure out how to unlock doors, and could even devise and set up elaborate traps for their prey. My point is, stop taking away all their credit just because one of them is friends with a crispy rat. One of the most dangerous herbivorous dinosaurs is easily the legendary Stegosaurus. They reached upwards of 20 feet or 6 meters in length and weighed upwards of 5 tons. Much like their cousins, the ankylosaurs, they have a wide array of bony plates. These plates would have been used for display, both for attracting mates and intimidating predators. But the real moneymaker is that tail. Stegosaurus possesses a special weapon known as a thagomizer. The thagomizer was made up of 4 spikes, each reaching 2 to 3 feet or 60 to 90 centimeters. When even the apex of your time doesn't really want to mess with you, you know you're doing something right. Ants come in all shapes and sizes, but during the time of the dinosaurs, one group stood out from the rest. These are hell ants. Like many of their modern cousins, they have a stinger used to paralyze prey. But they have two key features that separate them from the rest of their family, their horns and their jaws. As opposed to having jaws horizontally side to side like modern ants, they actually had vertical jaws. That's right, their jaws are scythe-like and point straight up and down. And they have a similar mechanism to trapjaw ants, meaning they likely could close their jaw at upwards of 80 miles or 128 kilometers per hour. It was theorized that they'd use these jaws to stab and hold their prey in place while they delivered a paralyzing sting. And that's where those horns come in. They use those horns to trap prey against the horn and the jaws. An ant with scythe-like jaws and a stinger capable of paralyzing prey? Yeah, I think I'm gonna pass on this one. This is the largest raptor we know of. Meet the Utah raptor. These massive dromaeosaurs reach up to 18 feet or 5.5 meters in length. Standing at over 7 feet tall, they easily dwarf both us and the Jurassic Park raptors. While most dromaeosaurs are built for speed, these guys were built for strength. Aside from being larger than other raptors, their bones are far more robust. This extra strength helped them out in a few different areas. Instead of chasing prey down, they were likely an ambush hunter. That extra weight would have been useful in holding prey down while they killed it. The sickle claw that they're ever so famous for could reach upwards of 9 inches or 24 centimeters. Unlike other raptors who would mostly kill prey with their jaws, these guys had another weapon called them hands. Utah raptor had specialized arm claws that had a deadly cutting edge. Between their claws, jaws, and feet, these guys are a triple threat. A truly terrifying yet beautiful animal. This animal is none other than Mozchops. They're a tanky therapsid from the Permian era. They reach just over 2.5 meters and just under 9 feet in length. Weighing anywhere from about 300 to 700 pounds or 130 to 330 kilograms, these guys were big boys. And it seems they would have needed to throw that weight around. They're presumed to have fought by headbutting one another for mating rights. And it's thought that they may have been partially aquatic, similar to hippos. And honestly, if they shared the temperament of the hippos, I would feel bad for any of the Permian predators. Because it seems that their thick, specialized skulls could take more than a hit or two. And if they traveled in herds, it would make them an incredibly dangerous prospect for any carnivore. This is one herbivore that honestly doesn't get enough respect. This is a Carcharodontosaur named Neovenator. This was a mid to large-sized theropod that lived in what is currently modern-day England. They measure in at about 23 feet or 7 meters and weighing around 1 to 2 tons, though some scientists believe they could get much larger. Some estimates go as high as 33 feet or 10 meters, but most of those are considered dubious. Either way, this carnivore is one of the top predators in its ecosystem, competing with the likes of baryonyx for dominance. They also have specialized sensors in their snout to help them avoid biting things like bone, meaning they can literally sense the perfect place to bite. This guy may not be the biggest or the scariest or the meanest, but he's definitely one of the most precise predators. That is your reminder that dinosaurs really do still live among us. That is a cassowary, one of the largest birds still alive today. On average, these modern-day velociraptors reach about 5 to 6 feet tall or 1.5 to 1.8 meters, with some estimates reaching upwards of 6.5 feet or 2 meters. When I say modern-day raptor, that's no joke. They have a claw that can reach upwards of 5 inches or 125 millimeters. They use their legs as their main defensive weapon, using them to kick outwards. And sometimes they want to end something so badly that they'll resort to jump attacks, where they can jump nearly 5 feet or 1.5 meters into the air. But even an animal this terrifying deserves your respect and protection. Because of habitat loss by humans and invasive species like dogs and pigs, their numbers have been in decline. And on mainland Australia, there's thought to be less than 2,000 left. And I hope that we can all come together to help protect these amazing yet terrifying modern-day dinosaurs. Did you know that some sauropods had armor? This is Saltosaurus, a titanosaur from the late Cretaceous of Argentina. They weren't the biggest sauropods, reaching about 28 feet or 8.5 meters and weighing about 2 to 3 tons. But what they lack in size, they make up for in defensive armaments. Much like ankylosaurs, these guys had osteoderms running along their back and sides. And it's thought that in life, some of these osteoderms would have been keeled or spiked, making this animal an incredibly dangerous prey animal for any predator. And this is one of the few species that we have fossilized embryos for, which gives us a significantly better idea at what their lives were like. This is one incredibly intriguing herbivore. This is the largest marine reptile to ever exist that we know of. This animal is known as Shonisaurus, an ichthyosaur from the late Triassic. These absolutely enormous creatures could reach up to 69 feet, nice, or 21 meters in length, making them the largest marine reptile that we know of. And it's estimated that these guys could weigh nearly 90 tons, making them larger than even some modern whales today. We believe that the main prey source for these animals would have been smaller marine reptiles as well as ammonites and squids. Basically anything smaller than they were. Shonisaurus also had longer and thinner flippers than most of its other relatives. If you've ever been scuba diving, you know that longer fins help you go faster in the water. Meaning that this living submarine was actually probably built for speed, making the Triassic oceans that much more deadly and beautiful. This is the largest land-based predator since the age of the dinosaurs. Meet Barinasuchus, a cousin of modern-day crocodilians. These powerful crocodilians could reach up to 20 to 25 feet or 6 to 7.5 meters in length, making them the largest purely terrestrial carnivore since the Cretaceous. That's right, I said purely terrestrial. Barinasuchus is part of a group of meso-eucrocodilians known as sebasids. This group of crocodilomorphs had extremely long legs, allowing them to run or gallop similar to modern-day Cuban crocodiles. However, modern Cuban crocodiles can only run or gallop for a short period of time, whereas these animals were built for it. And if all that wasn't enough, they have jaws capable of snapping shut just like modern-day crocodilians. In fact, their snout is compressed in such a way to resist the forces of extremely powerful bites. Look man, crocodiles are intimidating enough as it is. I don't need to meet one that can also run you down. This dinosaur is known as the scorpion hunter. Meet Scorpiovenator, an abelisaurid from the late Cretaceous of Argentina. And before you say anything, no, they don't actually hunt scorpions. They were called such because of the amount of scorpions found at the dig site. But like the rest of the abelisaurids, these guys were still hunters, mainly of juvenile sauropods. These powerful predators were around mid-size for the average carnivorous dinosaur, reaching a length of about 20 feet or 6 meters. Anywhere else in the world, it may have been a top predator, but unfortunately it had to share territory with the Carcharodontosaurid named Mapusaurus. Abelisaurids are definitely not the largest carnivorous dinosaurs, but they're definitely one of the most adaptable. And against most of their competition, that adaptability is going to win them the day every time. Ah, the complicated relationships of dinosaurs. This is one of my favorite weird dinosaurs. Meet Incisvisaurus, an oviraptorid from the early Cretaceous of China. They're not very large animals, only about a meter long or about 3 feet, and only weighing about 5 kilograms or 10 pounds. They're a primitive member of a group known as oviraptorsaurs, which are famous for their beaks.
Break his beak!
And while you can definitely see the beginnings of one taking place, these guys didn't have a fully formed beak. Instead, they had very large rat-like teeth. And despite how goofy those buck teeth look, they're definitely still incredibly useful for the animal. These animals lived in densely forested areas, and it's thought that they'd use these teeth to crack open fruits and nuts. And though Incisvisaurus lacks any real outward defenses, a bite from these guys would definitely upset any predator. Some specimens of this species have also been found with feathers, including extremely long ones on their arms. Because of this animal's build, we know that it couldn't fly, so it's assumed that these incredibly long feathers would have been used for display. It's fascinating to me how an animal can be so ugly yet so beautiful at the same time. The wonders of nature. What was the largest crocodilian to ever live? There's a lot of debate about this online, so let's see what current paleontology says. Firstly, a lot of folks like to claim Sarcosuchus as the largest crocodilian. Sarcosuchus isn't actually a true crocodilian, it's a relative known as a crocodilomorph. They're not actually as large as many people have you believe. They're only about 30 feet or 9 meters in length. The estimates that used to claim 40 plus feet are long outdated, so Sarcosuchus is out of the count. The real competition is between these two, Deinosuchus and Purosaurus. Current estimates for both species place Deinosuchus at about 33 feet or 10 meters and Purosaurus at about 10.9 meters or 36 feet. However, one specimen of this species shows us that Deinosuchus may have reached up to 39 feet or 12 meters. Other studies contest this estimate, saying that it was only about 35 to 36 feet, about the same length as Purosaurus. There is conflicting weight estimates for both species, but generally it seems that Purosaurus would have been heavier. So while it's still up for debate, it's definitely between these two titans. This is the most well-studied dinosaur in the world. This is Psittacosaurus, a ceratopsian that lived all across Asia during the early Cretaceous. Hundreds of specimens for this species have been found, including several nearly complete, allowing us to study this dinosaur at every stage of its life. We know that juveniles of this species start off as quadrupedal before adopting a bipedal stance once they get older. Thanks to scans and studies of the skull, we know that these animals had extremely well-developed eyesight and smell, as well as having a relatively large brain for a dinosaur of their size. Studies of the melanosomes also show us the color of some species, as well as showing us that those species were counter-shaded, allowing them to better blend in and hide from predators. They also possess extremely odd but unique bristles on the back of their tail. These bristles were highly modified scales, and what their purpose is we aren't entirely sure, but we assume it was display. And on top of all that, we know that Psittacosaurus was an extremely successful animal. There was up to 12 species spanning across 25 million years. Now there's a win for the underdogs. Did you know that penguins were covered in oil? They produce a type of oil known as preen oil, which they spread all over their body. This serves to keep the penguin warm while it's diving into the freezing waters. And you know, we've got a saying where I'm from. The oily boy gets the worm. You're welcome. This is the largest eagle that ever existed that we know of. This is Haast's eagle, an extinct species of eagle from New Zealand. These massive birds stood over 3 feet tall or 90 centimeters in height, with a wingspan of over 8.5 feet or about 2.6 meters. It's thought that the largest individuals may have had a wingspan of upwards of 10 feet or 3 meters. These animals could weigh up to 33 pounds or 15 kilograms, making them the heaviest eagle ever known. Some of you may think their wingspan is a little short, and rightfully so. This was a forest-dwelling species, and shorter wings allowed it to maneuver easier throughout the trees. This bird's main source of prey was the giant flightless bird known as the moa. But wait, how could a 30-pound eagle take down a 500-pound moa? The same way many modern birds of prey do, speed. It's estimated that this species could reach up to 50 miles or 80 kilometers per hour at their fastest, allowing them to drop like a ton of bricks. When humans first arrived and started hunting the moa, it was thought that the Haast eagle started hunting humans as a form of supplication before they were driven to extinction. Unfortunate to see a beautiful animal go. This is the hyena of the Jurassic, Ceratosaurus. These mid-sized carnivores could reach up to 23 feet or 7 meters in length and weigh about 1,500 pounds or 700 kilograms. In most places, at most times, Ceratosaurus would have been the top predator. But because of when and where they lived in the Jurassic, they had to pay taxes to pretty much every other large carnivore. These animals shared territory with Torvosaurus, Allosaurus, and Saurophaganax. And compared to most of these animals, Ceratosaurus is extremely rare, only making up for about 1 in every 7. It's thought that this population difference has to do with niche partitioning. It's thought that Ceratosaurus may have hunted different prey or have eaten different parts of a carcass than Allosaurus or the other carnivores. This is indicated both by the length of their snout and the length of their teeth. These teeth could reach up to 4 inches long, which is insanely large for the proportions of Ceratosaurus. And everyone loves Allosaurus, I completely get it. But personally, I kinda like the underdog story a little bit more. On Skull Island, there's no shortage of horrors. One of those is the brutal and cunning raptor known as Venatosaurus. These guys were bigger than any dromaeosaur known today, reaching 16 to 24 feet in length or about 4.8 to 7.3 meters. Living within the craggy and rocky terrain of Skull Island, these animals were not quite as fast as their prehistoric counterparts, but they were far more agile and flexible. This would have been extremely useful to them while hunting, able to outmaneuver basically any opponent. These were perfect ambush predators with eyes set on the top of their head to get as low to the ground as they could before springing themselves into action. This social pack hunter was even able to take down the island's top sauropods. If you'd like to find out how, click the link in my bio to be taken to my full-length video. This is the real-life animal behind the Mandalorian's mudhorn. This animal is known as Elasmotherium. This was an enormous species of rhino that lived all over Central and Northern Asia. These behemoths could reach up to 16 feet or 5 meters in length and weigh over 5 tons. And they stood around 8 feet or 2.5 meters tall. Much like the mudhorn that Mando had to face, these guys are traditionally depicted with a massive horn. This horn was once thought to be up to 3 meters or around 10 feet in length. However, more recent studies show us that their horns likely couldn't reach quite that size and were in fact much smaller. The study shows that the animal probably didn't have enough muscles to support such a large horn. But they still did have a horn, just not quite as large as most media depicts. When it did have that size of a horn, you can definitely see why it used to be called the Siberian unicorn. This draconic-looking snake is known as the African hairy bush viper. They're one of my favorite venomous snake species because they just look really cool. But this species is as dangerous as they are beautiful. They're not too big, about 73 centimeters or a little over 2 feet. It's their venom that really gives people a run for their money. Not too much is known about their venom, but we know that it's a mixture of neurotoxin and cytotoxin, possibly also having some hemotoxin in there as well. For those of you not too versed in venom, neurotoxin attacks your nervous system, cytotoxin attacks your muscles, and hemotoxin causes you to bleed profusely. It was once thought that this species and their cousins were less toxic than others, but that's just because they don't bite people as often. Because there's no antivenom for this species, a bite can be fatal if you don't get immediate medical attention. However, this species is arboreal, meaning they lived in trees, and because of that, bites are far less common. Honestly, if you get bitten by one of these things, it's probably your own fault. And despite their horrifying venom, you have got to agree that this is one of the most beautiful snake species you've ever seen. This is the longest sauropod that we know of. This is Supersaurus, a diplodocid sauropod from the late Jurassic. These massive sauropods reached 108 to 115 feet or 33 to 35 meters. And they could weigh upwards of 40 tons, and while that's not as impressive as some other sauropods, it's still a massive size. There are estimates of even larger sizes, but they have yet to be confirmed. And I already know some of you are going to come at me in the comments saying there's other longer dinosaurs. Unfortunately, any dinosaur that would have been possibly considered longer than Supersaurus is either fragmentary or just plain dubious. And until more fossils are found that indicate that one of them was longer, Supersaurus currently holds that title. We will just have to wait and see. A new fossil could be just around the corner. Today is Easter in the United States, so let's talk about the dinosaur most heavily associated with eggs, Oviraptor. Oviraptor is a bit of a misunderstood dinosaur because it was found laying atop of eggs that were presumed to belong to Protoceratops. That earned them the name egg thief. However, modern research shows that those eggs actually belonged to Oviraptor, and it was actually the mother brooding over her nest. And this isn't exclusive to just Oviraptor. Its relative known as Cetipati also had similar nesting behaviors. Oviraptor and their relatives laid their eggs in a circle around the nest, and then sat in the middle of them to cover them with all of their feathers. This would allow them to both avoid sitting on the eggs, but still keeping them warm. Aside from hadrosaurs, these guys might be some of the best dinosaur parents. Oh, and if you're curious, they're not quite as large as you might think. Oviraptor only reached about 5.2 feet or 1.6 meters in length and only weighed around 90 pounds or about 40 kilograms. When it comes to dinosaur thieves, Oviraptor may have been exempt from that rule. One of the most dangerous reptiles alive today, this is the Komodo dragon. These massive lizards can reach up to 10 feet or 3 meters in length and weigh around 220 pounds or 100 kilograms. Komodos will eat nearly any animal they can, but they tend to favor deer. They've even been observed swallowing deer and other prey animals whole. This species is also venomous, and they have what's called a hemotoxin, which affects your blood. The venom acts as an anticoagulant, which prevents your blood from clotting and forming scabs. In the prey of Komodo dragon, this can often lead to shock and blood loss enough that the dragon can finish off their meal with relative ease. Oh, and if that wasn't quite enough for you, these guys are also armored. As they grow, Komodo dragons develop osteoderms similar to crocodilians. And while the rest of their senses aren't good, these animals have an incredible sense of smell that allows them to scent prey for up to 6 miles. And for short amounts of time, this animal can reach bursts of speed of upwards of 12 miles an hour. These animals are big, fast, armored, and venomous. And that goes to show you the absolute wonders of evolution. This is the largest lion to ever exist that we know of. This is the American lion. These lions first appeared in North America about 340,000 years ago, and they were quite a bit larger than the modern African lion. The largest American lions could be upwards of 8 feet or 2.5 meters in length and weigh upwards of 800 pounds or about 360 kilograms. For reference, the largest modern lions weigh about 500 pounds or 230 kilograms. Which would have been about average for the American lion. These animals needed all the help they could get because they still competed with animals like Smilodon and the short-faced bear. And much like their modern relatives, they weren't shy about what they hunted. We have evidence that they've attacked and killed prey as large as American bison. Much like their modern counterparts, American lions lived in open savanna and grassland from Alaska all the way down to Mexico. Aside from all of that, it seems that they may have had a higher intelligence than most of their contemporaries. The La Brea tar pits are an incredibly famous predator trap, but the American lion is very rare there. It's thought that's because the lion was smart enough to evade it. They're everything a lion is, except bigger, stronger, and smarter, and that's absolutely brilliant. This is a powerful carnivore with a confusing name. Meet Sinraptor, a large predator from the late Jurassic. Despite having raptor in their name, these guys aren't related to Dromaeosauraptors at all. Sinraptor is a carnosaur, specifically a Metriacanthosaur, meaning it's related to animals like Metriacanthosaurus, Yangshuanosaurus, and Allosaurus. And much like its relative Yangshuanosaurus, these guys were found in China. In fact, its name, Sinraptor, literally means Chinese robber. And Sinraptor isn't a small fry either. These guys can reach nearly 30 feet in length, or about 8.8 meters, and weigh around 2 tons. In its ecosystem, it likely would have taken the role of Allosaurus as being the apex predator. Sinraptor is a robber, but a robber of lives. Prehistoric oceans were a terrifying place, especially with this beast around. This is Leopleurodon, a pliosaur from Jurassic Europe. Let's get the elephant out of the room right now. They're not nearly as big as many of you have seen in Walking with Dinosaurs. In Walking with Dinosaurs, Leopleurodon is an 80-foot or 25-meter monster. While they're definitely huge animals, they're nowhere near that size. The real Leopleurodon could reach sizes of up to 22 feet or about 6.6 meters and weigh around 3 tons. But that was still more than enough to allow Leopleurodon to become the apex predator of its oceans. Leopleurodon wouldn't have been exceptionally fast, but based on its flippers it would have had great acceleration, perfect for an ambush predator. To that end, they were likely countershaded similar to great white sharks, with a darker coloring on top and a lighter coloring on bottom to better disguise themselves from their prey. They were likely also opportunistic, allowing them to eat anything they could get their mouths on. Definitely a majestic yet terrifying animal. One could even say it's a magical Leopleurodon. The most famous dinosaur of all time is without a doubt the man, the myth, the legend, Godzilla. The latest version measures in at over 580 feet or nearly 180 meters. Weighing in at nearly 100,000 tons, he's larger than most of our aircraft carriers. In the monsterverse, Godzilla and his species were meant to keep balance in the world by keeping the other monsters in check. One of the ways they achieve this is with a bionuclear circulatory system. Godzilla doesn't consume food the same way that you, me, or any other animal does. Instead, he feeds on radiation. Whenever he feels necessary, he's able to trigger a neutron flux in his dorsal spines. This energy travels to nucleosynthetic chambers in his throat, which then explode with the energy that forms his atomic breath. His bionuclear nature also allows him to consume radiation in order to heal. And these are just some of the things that allow Godzilla to claim the title, King of the Monsters. This is one of the most beautiful, successful, and widespread birds in the entire world. This is the barn owl, and they can be found in almost every habitat across the entire world. With potentially over 15 subspecies, these guys know how to adapt and survive in almost any environment. They have a few key features that allow them to be so successful. One of them is their ability to fly almost silently. Like most owls, they have tiny serrations on their wings that help them to break up the flow of air, allowing this brilliant predator to approach its prey undetected. Another key feature to the barn owl's success is its face and its ears. Like many owls, barn owl's ears are placed at different heights on its head. When sound approaches an owl, it first hits their facial disc, which then distributes that sound to both ears. One ear tells the owl the distance to their prey, and the other ear tells the owl the height of their prey. These are brilliant and beautiful predators, but you know I can't let you guys go without disturbing you a little bit. Barn owls don't hoot like regular owls. They scream. This dinosaur is known as the destroyer of shins. This is Zool. Zool is an ankylosaur from the late Cretaceous of North America. These bone breakers could reach up to about 20 feet or 6 meters in length and weigh about 2.5 tons. Zool has quite a few features that set it apart from other ankylosaurs, but one of the key ones is that all of its osteoderms were rather pointed. Most ankylosaurs had rounded or smooth osteoderms, very similar to crocodilians, but not Zool. Zools are more like spikes, and they're one of the only ankylosaur species to have osteoderms running along the sides of their tails that we know of. It was this that earned it the nickname Destroyer of Shins, but they may have actually been useful for much more. It was discovered recently that Zool also used its tail against other ankylosaurs. This was more than likely done for mating purposes, but it's the first evidence of intraspecific combat between ankylosaurs. Say what you will, but when it comes to ankylosaurs, no one's excluded from that club. Did you know that there's a parasite that turns snails into zombies? This is the green-banded broodsac. This is a species of parasitic flatworm, and you guessed it, their hosts are snails. Snails will often become infected by eating plant matter that also happens to contain the parasite's eggs. The eggs develop inside the snail into something called a sporocyst, which eventually produces long branching tubes. These tubes will then turn into broodsacs, which make their way into the snail's eye stalk. At this point, the parasite is a major influence over its host. The goal of the parasite is to make the snake's eye stalks resemble caterpillars so that way they get eaten by birds. The worm causes the infected snail to stay out in the open longer, making it a much easier target for birds. Infected snails are much more active, that way they bring as much attention to themselves as possible. Now, there's almost no chance this species could ever evolve to infect humans, but honestly, that doesn't make the prospect any less terrifying. This is a savage and brutal monster. This is Deviljho, one of the most infamous and dangerous creatures in the Monster Hunter world. These monstrosities could reach up to 67 feet or 20 meters in length and weigh around 20 tons. Its jaws are massive and capable of crushing bone, and it's dotted with large teeth both outside and in. And one of its favorite methods of hunting is literally just picking up their prey with its jaws and slamming it into whatever they can. When this monstrosity becomes enraged, its muscles swell to an incredible degree and begin emanating a black and red mist. It can then use this mist as a breath attack, similar to a dragon. Devil Joe can become enraged quite often, and because of this, its body consumes a massive amount of energy. Because of this, Devil Joe is in a constant state of near starvation, making it even angrier. It forces them to be nomadic and travel vast distances in search of food, even to the point of being cannibalistic, and they eat prey alive to waste as little time as possible replenishing their energy. An absolute savage and brutal monster. Most prehistoric creatures are larger than their modern-day counterparts, and these guys are no exception. This is the Eurasian cave hyena. This species had an enormous range, having lived as far west as the Iberian Peninsula and reaching as far east as the eastern parts of Siberia. While they share many traits with their modern-day relatives, they do have some traits that set them apart. These hyenas had significantly longer legs than modern spotted hyenas, and this was likely an adaptation for hunting horses. Aside from having long legs, cave hyenas also weighed more than modern hyenas. Modern spotted hyenas can reach about 140 pounds or 64 kilograms. Cave hyenas could reach up to 103 kilograms, just shy of 230 pounds. However, they would have needed all the weight they could because their main competition were creatures like the Eurasian cave lion and the cave bear. These hyenas were incredibly successful animals, and even today we aren't sure why they went extinct. I guess that's just another mystery of prehistory. This dangerous-looking fire monster is none other than Glavenus. Glavenus is widely regarded as one of the most powerful brute wyverns in Monster Hunter. This monster resembles Carnotaurus, albeit it's much larger. Glavenus can reach near 25 meters or over 80 feet in length. But size alone isn't what makes them one of the most dangerous. Glavenus's most unique trait is its sword-like tail. During battle, this tail can become red hot. In this state, the tail is capable of creating fiery explosions and even sending out waves of fire. However, if enough time passes during the fight, the bladed tail will start to cool off, allowing it to collect rocks and ores around it as it sticks into the ground. Now that may sound like a detriment, but Glavenus actually uses it to their advantage. Glavenus can constantly resharpen its tail using its mouth. It will melt down the rock and ore from the tail into a magma-like substance that can spit from its mouth, and all of that without mentioning some of their arguably more powerful variants. This relentless monstrosity is none other than Anjanath. Anjanath is a monster that looks like what you'd get after you mix a Tyrannosaurus with a vulture. These monsters are extremely aggressive and will attack almost anything without provocation. They have a massive set of jaws, and their lower jaw is actually larger, giving them the appearance of an underbite. When Anjanath becomes enraged, it unfurls its nasal crests and dorsal sails to make itself look bigger and far more angry. While they become enraged, an organ in their throat begins to glow, allowing them to breathe fire. And in some regions, they can even become the much more dangerous Fulgur Anjanath. Aside from Fulgur Anjanath being physically stronger, it also boasts the lightning element instead of fire. This widens their range of attacks and allow them to hold their own against even other top-tier predators like Tigrex. Between both species, Anjanath has definitely earned its reputation as one of Monster Hunter's fiercest wyverns. This curious-looking bird is called a hornbill. Right off the bat, yes, I know they look very similar to toucans, but they're actually not that closely related. Their similarity to toucans is actually an example of convergent evolution. Hornbills are actually incredibly successful, with over 50 species spread across 15 genera. Hornbills can be found all across Africa and Asia. Many of them have odd and very specifically unique behaviors. For example, the helmeted hornbill uses its casque as a battering ram against other hornbills. Oh, by the way, this thing on top of their head is called a casque. And these hornbills use them as rams in a dramatic aerial joust. Some hornbills, like the Malabar pied hornbill, will even eat poisonous fruits. Despite that, most hornbills don't exclusively eat fruit, but will also supplement their diet with small animals. Hornbills are monogamous, and during the mating season, they have an excellent way of defending their nest. Before the female lays eggs, her and the male will cover the entrance to the nest with mud, droppings, and fruit pulp. This is mostly to defend themselves from other hornbills. They're oddly aggressive little buggers. This is one of the oldest carnivorous dinosaurs that we know of. This is Herrerasaurus, and they lived almost 230 million years ago. In fact, Herrerasaurus is so old that many people didn't consider them a dinosaur for the longest time. Instead, they consider Herrerasaurus an archosaur, an early relative of dinosaurs. Nowadays, however, it is much more widely accepted that Herrerasaurus was in fact an early dinosaur. This ancient predator was actually fairly large for early dinosaurs, reaching up to 20 feet or 6 meters in length and weighing around 770 pounds or 350 kilograms. Based on their light build in comparison to their relatively large size, it's thought that these guys were swift and agile hunters. They were just part of the beginning of what would eventually become a dinosaur-filled world, and that's absolutely magnificent. This is Shunosaurus, and it might be the closest thing we ever have to a real hybrid dinosaur. Shunosaurus was a sauropod from the late Jurassic, but it has many traits that are not typically found in sauropods. Firstly, it has the second shortest neck out of any sauropod. On top of that, it's actually one of the smaller sauropods, only reaching about 9.5 meters or 31 feet in length and weighing about 3 tons. But the main reason that this might be the closest we ever get to a hybrid is this, its tail club. The tail of Shunosaurus is rounded like a club with 2 spike-like osteoderms on top. These osteoderms could reach upwards of 2 inches or 5 centimeters in length, giving Shunosaurus a tail club very similar to Ankylosaurs. Just like Ankylosaurs, this specialized tail club would have helped Shunosaurus defend itself from predators like Gasosaurus. Exactly when and why they developed this tail club is still unknown, but hopefully we'll find out in the future. Genndy Tartakovsky's Primal is full of many monstrous creatures. There have been very few that our main heroes couldn't defeat. Their first true defeat came at the hands of these massive herbivores. These are Primal's woolly mammoths. These beasts are far larger than their real-life counterparts, and most of them are about double the size of Fang, making them about a third bigger than real-life mammoths. These mammoths are also highly social, complex, and intelligent creatures. Like elephants today, these guys mourned their dead and actually took them to a special place to be laid to rest. They became vengeful when they discovered his remains were missing. These powerful creatures were some of the only ones that could have actually killed our main heroes, but the only reason they didn't is because the heroes gave them what they wanted. After retrieving their fallen comrades' tusk, they departed in peace. If you'd like to learn more about the fauna of Primal or these woolly mammoths, check out my full-length video. This powerful tyrannosaur is none other than Primal's Fang. Fang is a green and blue tyrannosaur with an unusually large tooth, giving her a bit of a stronger bite. Aside from size, she shares many traits with the real tyrannosaur, including excellent smell and excellent vision. But by far, Fang's biggest asset is her intelligence. Fang is both smart and wise enough to form a bond and relationship with Spear. She's learned to fight with him in tandem, and together they make an incredible duo. Fang also serves as an early warning system, as she can detect threats far sooner than Spear. I also forgot to mention, she's intelligent enough to mimic Spear's attacks, which on its own is a pretty impressive feat overall. If you'd like to learn more about Fang, Spear, and all the other terrifying creatures of Primal, make sure to check out this full-length video. By now, most folks know that ravens are one of the smartest birds. But exactly how smart are our feathered friends? Ravens are one of 4 creatures that display linguistic displacement. This means that ravens can communicate about things that are not immediately in front of them, like a carcass nearby. Ravens are also in the habit of trading, whether it be with other ravens or even with people. And they're smart enough to recognize when a trade is unfair as well. Because they can remember who wronged them, they won't trade with that being anymore. Like many animals, ravens will cache and store food for a later date. However, ravens will often watch where other ravens deposit their food caches and steal from them. This thievery is so common that many ravens will often pretend to cache their food and fly off somewhere else to store it. And honestly, my favorite raven fact is that they're one of the few creatures that understand the concept of fun. They've been observed playing with wolf pups before, and even sliding down snowbanks just for the fun of it. Easily one of the most fascinating modern dinosaurs. This is the largest feathered dinosaur that we know of. This is Eutyrannus, and it's an early species of tyrannosaur from what is modern-day China. Many folks used to think that dinosaurs over a certain size couldn't have feathers because they wouldn't have a need for them. Eutyrannus changed that and showed us that even a large predator could have a coating of feathers. Eutyrannus may not be the largest predator, but they could reach nearly 30 feet or 9 meters in length and weigh nearly 2 tons. Several Eutyrannus specimens were found together, leading paleontologists to believe that they may have been pack hunters. This is further evidenced by the large sauropods in the area that they would have needed to cooperate to take down. Eutyrannus definitely earned its name, the Feathered Tyrant. This is the Florida man equivalent of a saber-toothed cat. This is Florida's very own Xenosmilus, a macrodont related to the saber-toothed cat Smilodon. They are incredibly heavy for their size, reaching about 300 to 350 kilograms, or about 660 to 770 pounds. Xenosmilus differs from other saber-toothed cats in a lot of ways, but especially its teeth. While their saber teeth are shorter than their cousins, every single one of Xenosmilus's teeth is serrated. And the way its teeth were lined up, it would have been able to focus force on the top part of its jaw. This has led to a theory and a nickname for Xenosmilus, the cookie cutter cat. Xenosmilus would have ambushed its prey, bitten it, and then retreated. Because of the way it can concentrate force, every time it does this, it would have ripped a chunk of flesh from its prey. This would eventually cause their prey to die from shock and blood loss with a bunch of cookie-shaped holes in them. And honestly, I don't know of a wilder saber-toothed cat, so Florida, you earned this one. This dinosaur is none other than the heavy claw, Baryonyx. Baryonyx is a large spinosaurid from early Cretaceous Europe, reaching up to 10 meters or 33 feet in length and weighing around 2 tons. They get their name from the large 12-inch claws on both arms. Baryonyx was the first spinosaur discovered with direct evidence of piscivory. That means they eat fish, by the way. Like gharials, they would have swept their heads side to side in the water and snatched up any fish they could. And like bears, anything too large to snap up, they would have used their massive claws to pin down before finishing them off. Aside from that, they also have a few more adaptations specifically for catching fish. First and foremost, their teeth. Like most spinosaurids, Baryonyx had straight and conical teeth perfect for gripping fish. A 2016 study also showed that spinosaurids could displace their lower jaws similar to a pelican. This would allow Baryonyx and other spinosaurids to swallow large prey whole. They're absolutely fascinating creatures. This is the embodiment of death and decay in the Monster Hunter universe, Valhazak. These massive elder dragons could reach 26 meters or just over 85 feet in length. Similar to deep-sea fish like viperfish, they have a set of double lower jaws. However, this dragon's real power comes from a mysterious substance known only as effluvium. The effluvium spores appear as a pollen-like miasma around the dragon. It can release effluvium like a large cloud or even spew it from its mouth like a breath attack. As the substance builds on its victims' bodies, it weakens them both physically and mentally. In the worst cases, some creatures will go insane and start attacking other members of their own species. And to make matters worse, Valhazak can take it back. Valhazak can take the effluvium back from any creature, draining its life and killing them usually in the process. This also happens to heal the dragon of any wounds it's taken. Look, I don't know which one of you ordered the zombie dragon, but I love it. Once again, another paper was released that changed the way we look at spinosaurids. The paper discusses the cranial and jaw morphology of this animal, Irritator. This paper shows that when Irritator opens its jaws, its lower mandibles spread apart like a pelican, but with the jaw closing speed of a crocodilian. This shows us that Irritator can swallow prey much larger than previously thought whole. Because we don't have a ton of skull material for other spinosaurids like Spinosaurus itself, we aren't sure if this trait extends to them, though it seems Baryonyx and Suchomimus may have both shared this trait. Also, I've seen a lot of images like this going around recently with people claiming that the Isle Spinosaurus is more accurate because of this paper. Spoiler alert, it's not. Their jaws don't just split down the middle, the back half of their jaws spread wider to allow them to eat more. Did we just get a new update on some really cool spinosaurs? Yeah. Did this study prove that Irritator had a jaw like the Isle Spinosaurus? No, it didn't, so we should just be happy with the good science we did get. This is one of the most unique birds of prey alive today. This beautiful bird is none other than the osprey. Osprey are one of the most successful birds of prey, having a near cosmopolitan range. That means they can be found in almost every habitat across the world. This success is largely due to their diet and the adaptations to assist them with said diet. Ospreys have evolved to hunt down fish, and they are extremely good at it. Like owls, ospreys have reversible toes, meaning they can grip with 2 in the front and 2 in the back, which makes it far easier to actually grab the prey in the first place. The scales on the talons of the osprey are backwards facing and act as barbs to help hold the bird's catch. Additionally, they have spicules under their toes, which are small spikes that further assist them in grasping prey. Ospreys are also able to close their nostrils underwater, allowing them to dive for longer periods. Their specialization of fish has allowed the osprey to become one of the most successful birds of prey in the modern era, and that's absolutely brilliant. This is the largest non-sauropod dinosaur that we know of. This is Shantungosaurus, and it goes to show that hadrosaurs shouldn't be underestimated. Shantungosaurus is a behemoth estimated to be upwards of 50 feet or 16 meters in length. They were thought to be able to reach upwards of 14 tons, which is 4 tons heavier than the largest tyrannosaur yet known. We're not entirely sure why it was able to attain such sizes, but it's possible that with the lack of sauropods, they were able to take over that niche. While younger Shantungosaurus may have had to worry about predators like Zhucheng tyrannus, adults would have had almost no natural predators. Look, hadrosaurs may not possess a lot of outright defenses, but when they're this size and this bulky, they don't really need it. This is the dragon that hunts other dragons. This is none other than Nergigante, one of Monster Hunter's fiercest elder dragons. These brutes can reach up to 75 feet or about 22.5 meters in length. Nergigante is covered in large bristly spikes that regrow as they're broken off. This elder dragon is most notable because it hunts other elder dragons. Nergigante is nature's way of balancing life out in the Monster Hunter world by eliminating animals that are way too dangerous. To do so, it has almost unequivocal strength, even giving Devil Joe a run for their money. Those spikes that I mentioned earlier take some time to harden, but once they do, they become much more lethal and dangerous. Nergigante can also launch these spikes as projectiles, giving them a deceptively long range. Nergigante is one of the most aggressive, fierce, and powerful dragons in Monster Hunter, but when you hunt other dragons, you kinda need to be. This is one of my favorite modern birds, the scarlet macaw. Macaws are a subgroup of parrots, and they can be distinguished by a blank patch of skin on their face. Scarlet macaws are often referred to as one of the most beautiful birds on the planet because of their dazzling plumage. They're not very large birds, only reaching about 32 inches or about 81 centimeters in length, but more than half of that is just their tail feathers. While typically a fairly docile bird, during the mating season, these guys can get extremely aggressive. But of course, what good parent doesn't aggressively defend their babies? Many people seem to believe that this bird is endangered, and that's kinda true. In many places along Central America, the scarlet macaw has lost a lot of its natural habitat, and unfortunately it's led to a few local extinctions. However, overall, the species is still doing well, with a great number of birds still living in South America. They are some of the most beautiful and intelligent birds in the entire world. 2011's Rio introduced many of us to an extremely rare bird. This is the Spix's macaw, otherwise known as the little blue macaw. And Rio wasn't wrong either. These birds were, and technically are, in grave danger. As of 1990, there were only 15 Spix's macaw left that we knew of. Over the years, a multitude of breeding programs have increased their number, mainly led by Al Wabra Wildlife Preservation. Unfortunately, for a long time, that wasn't enough, and in 2019, the species was declared extinct in the wild. A major issue with the breeding program was such a low diversity of genetics. This problem was partially solved by artificially breeding Spixes with other macaws. Thanks to the dedication of so many organizations, the captive population of Spixes in 2022 was over 170. As of June of 2022, they released some specimens back into the wild as part of a reintroduction program. 8 macaws were reintroduced to the wild, and because of their success, 12 more are planned to be released this year. Their success is something to be celebrated, and I can't wait to see what happens in the future. This is Monster Hunter's legendary black dragon, Fatalis. At over 41 meters or 130 feet, these guys are enormous even by Monster Hunter standards. The legends of Fatalis claim it to be one of the most powerful dragons in Monster Hunter, capable of destroying entire kingdoms in a single night. Many dragons, especially in Monster Hunter, have fire abilities, but Fatalis's are unmatched. This fire is powerful enough to incinerate most enemies in a single breath. Fatalis can also emit a volatile powder from its body that can cause massive explosions. They can even emit heat from their body hot enough to melt all the metal around them. And legends say that this dragon is also sadistically smart as well. Fatalis will often take the fallen hunters that have tried to kill it and melt their armor, body, and weapons down to make more armor for themselves. Couple that with near unmatched physical strength and incredible regenerative abilities, and you have one dangerous monster. This is the original dinosaur horror game. This is Dino Crisis. It's a dinosaur survival horror made by the same team at Capcom that made Resident Evil. In the game, you play as Regina, a special military operative who was sent along with her team to recover the mad scientist Dr. Kirk. Kirk found a way to bring dinosaurs from the past into the present by exchanging pockets of time. However, Regina doesn't know this, and as the story begins to unravel, it's discovered more and more that dinosaurs are everywhere on the island. Over the course of the game, Regina and her crew are attacked multiple times by the dinosaurs, often in close and dangerous quarters. This was one of my favorite games from childhood and really exemplified the dinosaur horror that we all wanted to see. It goes without saying, Regina and her crew almost die several times, and in the most horrifying places possible. This is the game that Capcom really needs to remake. Alright, we gotta stop letting ornithologists name birds, because some of these are getting ridiculous. These are some of the most ridiculous bird names in the world. The fluffy-backed tit babbler. I got no words for that one. The gray go-away bird. Something tells me that the guy who named this one didn't like him very much. The satanic nightjar. Being fair, that one's kinda deserved. Boobies. That is all. The sad flycatcher. Whoever named that one must have really been going through it. The Spangled Drongo. This one's literally got Australia written all over it. The Banana Quit. Something tells me that this guy had an issue with his banana split. The Hoary Puffleg. I don't even have kind of an explanation for that one. That's just ridiculous. Speaking of ridiculous, the Tufted Tit Tyrant. Ornithologists, are you okay? Do you need help? And last but certainly not least is the Andean cock of the rock. I'm gonna blame the whole country of Peru because this one's your national bird. We gotta let someone else take over because these names are getting ridiculous. Many of you were introduced to this creature in Jurassic World, but this one is the real deal. This is Dimorphodon, a mid-sized carnivorous pterosaur from Jurassic Europe. They weren't the largest pterosaur, reaching only about a meter or 3 feet in length with a wingspan of about 5 feet or 1.5 meters. In the past, many folks have thought Dimorphodon was an insectivore because of the shape of its teeth. At one point, it was even argued that it was a piscivore, a fish eater. Thanks to paleontologist Mark Witten, we know that Dimorphodon was actually carnivorous a majority of the time. This was achieved thanks to a study on the wear and tear of the teeth. While Dimorphodon, like other pterosaurs, could certainly fly, it couldn't do so quite as well as its relatives. Its wings were very short, which has led some folks to speculate that they spend most of their life on the ground. They probably only took to the air as a last resort, panic flying like many modern birds do. But that comes with the unexpected nature of pterosaurs like Dimorphodon. Did you know that Jurassic Park compies are actually venomous? The compies in both the Jurassic Park book and film are venomous, but in the films they're less so. In the novel, however, their venom is potent enough to land them a few kills. So what kind of venom do compies have? The compies have a special type of venom laced with high amounts of serotonin. Many of you may already know that serotonin, along with dopamine, is one of the happy chemicals. Our brain uses serotonin to give us feelings of pleasure and excitement. Compies use it in a more sinister way. This high amount of serotonin gives prey a false sense of calm. It makes their prey calm and happy and allows the compy to eat with very little resistance. One of the only creatures that can kill you while making you happy. Horrifying. A bird famous for its aggression, this is the Canadian goose. This is one of the most successful large birds in all of North America, so much so that in many places they're considered a pest. However, most of us know better, and not everybody feels that way.
You know what? You got a problem with Canada gooses, and you got a problem with me, and I suggest that one marinate.
These geese are incredibly aggressive yet incredibly successful, but why? The easiest answer to that question is us. You see, by 1950, hunting and deforestation had driven their population extremely low. We began breeding programs to try to save the species as best as we could. This was incredibly successful, and today we have millions of geese all over North America. However, as their population increased, so too did their boldness. It seems that over the course of time, geese lost their fear of humans. This lack of fear allows them to be far more aggressive. This bad behavior is only reinforced because humans insist on feeding them. So honestly, if you don't like Canada gooses, you can't really blame anybody but humanity.
You got a problem with Canada gooses, you got a problem with me, and I suggest you let that one marinate.
This is the real Jurassic Park raptor. This is Deinonychus, a dromaeosaur from the early Cretaceous of North America. Both Michael Crichton and Steven Spielberg used this animal as the basis for the raptors in both the film and the novel. However, both the film and the novel make them much larger than the real Deinonychus would have been for dramatic effect. The real Deinonychus was around 3 feet or a meter tall and could reach up to 3.4 meters or about 11 feet in length. What many folks don't know is that Deinonychus is actually responsible for the dinosaur renaissance. The Renaissance was the reason that we all changed our perspectives of dinosaurs and now see them as warm-blooded. It's actually because of Deinonychus that dinosaurs aren't treated like giant, slow, and sluggish lizards anymore. Deinonychus is a dinosaur leading change in more ways than one. And it's probably the most important dinosaur discovered in the last 100 years. And I think that's absolutely brilliant. Did you know that this is Jurassic Park's original mosasaur? This is the Tylosaurus from Jurassic Park the game. Before Jurassic World was even thought of, this was the only underwater menace we had for this franchise. While not as large as their future counterpart, their size is actually fairly accurate. This Tylosaurus reached 46 feet or 14 meters in length. While its length is accurate, its weight is most certainly not, as this animal could reach 15 to 20 tons. As opposed to the real animal, who weighs around 8 tons. The Tylosaurus appears as the group is trying to escape from the underwater facility. It manages to claim one victim before the rest of the group makes it to safety. After this, we never see this version of Tylosaurus in any Jurassic media. But for many of us, this design is a fan favorite. Since the Jurassic World movies have thrown accuracy out the window, it wouldn't be a bad idea to bring this guy back. Just some food for thought. The most recent Jurassic World film wasn't very popular, but this creature within it was. This is Jurassic World's Therizinosaurus. This individual was 10 meters or 33 feet in length and stood at around 16.5 feet tall, about 5 meters. And weighing in at just over 5 tons, it's actually a fairly accurate size for this animal, albeit it looks a little skinny. At some point, this particular individual lost its eyesight, which allowed it to gain echolocation. And most of you already know, but that would not happen in real life. This Therizinosaurus is incredibly territorial and will even kill other herbivores in its area. Personally, I don't think this Therizinosaurus is that bad, but I have one major issue with it other than its blindness. That issue would be Therizinosaurus's famous claws. In the film, its claws are almost straight with little to no curve. The extremely long claws on a real Therizinosaurus would have been curved. Either way, this feathered dinosaur made an interesting addition to Jurassic World. These are the largest carnivorous dinosaurs in the Jurassic Park franchise. Starting with a pair of tyrannosaurs known as the buck and doe, these are the two from the Lost World. They stand at 17 feet or 5.1 meters tall and around 12 meters or 40 feet in length, weighing around 8 tons. Next up, we've got the Indominus Rex. This Indominus was around 5.5 meters or 18 feet tall and around 12 meters or 40 feet in length, with an unknown weight. Next up, we've got Rexy, or Roberta as some folks like to call her. She stands at 5.5 meters or 18 feet tall and 13.5 meters or 44 feet in length, weighing around 9 tons. Next up, we've got none other than the Spinosaurus. The largest Spinosaurus in the franchise could reach 6 meters or 20 feet tall and 13.5 meters or 44 feet in length, with a weight of around 10 tons. The largest on-screen carnivore we get to see is none other than the Giganotosaurus. This behemoth stood at around 6 meters or 20 feet tall and 15.5 meters or 51 feet in length, weighing around 10 tons. In Malcolm's own words,
Do they always have to go bigger?
the most recent Jurassic World movie introduced their very own version of Quetzalcoatlus. But how accurate is it? Firstly, this animal is way too large. A real Quetzalcoatlus had an enormous wingspan of up to 33 feet or 10 meters. Based on its size in comparison to the plane that it attacks, we can estimate that its wingspan is upwards of 25 meters or 80 feet in length. So it's more than double the size it should be. Aside from that, like most pterosaurs in this series, it's far too aggressive. While Asdarchids would have definitely been aggressive and assertive hunters, there's no way they would have ever considered taking on a plane of that size. Now, aside from all that, it's actually not a horrible design. Its crest is a little funky looking, but not outside the realm of possibility. Though I will say, they earned some points back in my book for the pycnofibers. For those of you unaware, pycnofibers are this hair-like substance that runs along the animal's body, which are actually primitive feathers. Nowadays, we know that pycnofibers went so far back in the pterosaur lineage that it's likely that most, if not all, pterosaurs had them. Overall, not the best, and definitely not the worst. The Scorpius Rex was Dr. Wu's first successful hybrid and one of the most dangerous dinosaurs in all the Jurassic franchise. But what makes this failed hybrid so dangerous? Like the rest of Wu's hybrids, they had grasping claws and opposable thumbs, allowing them to climb, and they also were able to use a prehensile tail to assist them. Like the Indominus, the Scorpius can see in infrared, allowing it to detect body heat. The Scorpius was deformed, similar to a pug with a brachycephalic muzzle. It's thought that because of all its genetic defects, it drove this animal insane, which is why it kills anything it sees. The Scorpius is named after the scorpion fish, whose DNA gave them venomous spikes. Like Blue, the Scorpius can reproduce asexually using a process called parthenogenesis. Because of how fast the Scorpius grows, this means within 2 weeks you could have too many to handle. And it just goes to show that Wu is actually right to decommission this one. This is the largest carnivorous dinosaur in Jurassic Park. This is Dominion's Giganotosaurus, and it's the largest carnivore we see on screen in any Jurassic Park movie. Standing at nearly 6 meters or 20 feet tall and measuring in at around 51 feet or 15.5 meters, this is an enormous animal. This is another animal that was evidently made to be a movie monster. It's got a pair of large crests over its eyes. It also has spikes and spines running down its back, culminating in an odd hump shape over the hips, similar to concave venator. Its teeth look oddly cone-shaped, more similar to that of modern crocodilians, which means it doesn't have the knife-like teeth of a real Giganotosaurus. However, it didn't really seem like it needed them. On its own, this Giganotosaurus was more than capable of taking on a Tyrannosaurus Rex. And in the end, Rexy needed a little backup to be able to take him down. Certainly not the most intelligent dinosaur, but certainly one of the most powerful in Jurassic World. I've said it before and I'll say it again, we need a Jurassic Park remake closer to the book. And not a movie, it should be like a miniseries so we have time to flesh out everything from the novels. Not only would it allow some fans to be introduced to new characters, concepts, and dinosaurs, but it would also be a good idea for this franchise to get back to its sci-fi horror roots. There is a lot of untapped potential in these novels. Personally, I think it's the smartest move Universal could make. If you guys agree with me, tag Universal and Jurassic Park in the comments below and let them know. This is the largest dinosaur skull that's ever been found. This is the skull of a Torosaurus named Adam, a ceratopsian dinosaur. This specimen recently went on display at the Newfoundland Safari Park in Denmark. Ceratopsians are known for their extremely large heads, but this guy takes it to another level. Adam's skull is over 3 meters or almost 10 feet in length. Adam is estimated to be around 7.5 meters or 25 feet in length, with just his noggin taking up over 1/3 of his body size. Make sure you tag someone down below who's got a big ass forehead. Before Jurassic Park 3 introduced us to Pteranodon and before they were updated in Jurassic World, the Lost World Jurassic Park gave us our first look at this flying pterosaur. The design in Jurassic World isn't the best. They have an incredibly short crest and overall their body just looks kind of odd. Personally, as a movie monster, I really enjoy Jurassic Park 3's Pteranodon. The only issue with the Jurassic Park 3 design is that it has teeth, which kind of fits with the Jurassic Park theme. However, the very first time we see Pteranodon at the end of the Lost World is probably the most accurate we've gotten. Certainly, this design has some issues on its own, but it doesn't have teeth in the beak and its crest is the appropriate length. And honestly, it's one of my favorite designs that should be brought back, albeit a little bit updated. If you'd like to learn more about the creatures in the Lost World, make sure to check out this video here. One of the most dangerous creatures in all of the Jurassic Park novels, this is the Lost World's Carnotaurus. They were smaller than the real deal, standing at around 7 feet or 2.1 meters and measuring in at around 20 to 25 feet or 6 to 7.5 meters. So if they're smaller, what makes them so dangerous? If you remember the Indominus Rex, one of the reasons it was so dangerous was because it could camouflage extremely well. It can camouflage! These Carnotaurus are not only able to camouflage, but they're able to mimic complex patterns like a chain-link fence and even the plants around it. In fact, during the nighttime, it's said that they're almost invisible unless you really pay attention, kind of like an elite from Halo. All the dinosaurs of Isla Sorna feared the Carnotaurus during the night. And if you'd like to learn more, make sure you check out this video. This is one of the most successful owls in the entire world. You may already recognize it. This is none other than the Great Horned Owl. Those horns on the top of its head are actually tufts of feathers called plumicorns. We don't fully understand plumicorns, but we believe that they're used for territorial interactions between owls. And contrary to popular belief, these plumicorns have nothing to do with the owl's ears. As I mentioned earlier, this is one of the most successful owls, but what sets them apart? In short, it's their adaptability. These birds have managed to survive in almost every environment, from snowy tundra to hot desert and even tropical rainforest. Based on what we can tell, as long as there's somewhat moderate tree cover, they can survive almost anywhere. They just need a tree to call home. And that is absolutely magnificent. For many folks, Jurassic World Dominion was their introduction to dinosaurs living in the wild on the mainland. But OG Jurassic Park fans know that this isn't the first time dinosaurs have escaped. Those of you who read the first novel know that that's kind of the entire plot. Compsognathus or Compys, as well as the Velociraptors, were secretly escaping off the island via boat. While we don't have an exact number on how many animals escaped, we know that many of the animals had been escaping for several months, so there could be dozens if not hundreds. When they first arrived, many of the animals began hunting and killing infants and children near the villages. However, by the end of the novel, most of these attacks seem to have stopped, and it's said that the animals have retreated further into the jungle. The only evidence that they were still around was that they were eating lysine-rich plants like soybeans. By the time this novel is over, we don't see or figure out what happens to these animals, so we can assume that they made a successful colony out in the jungle, making them the first truly wild dinosaurs in Jurassic Park. A new sauropod has surpassed Argentinosaurus for the title of largest dinosaur that we know of. This is Bryhotkayasaurus, a titanosaur from India. For many years, the size of this animal has been up for some debate because its original find was incredibly fragmentary. These latest size estimates would allow this sauropod to rival even the massive blue whale in size. Blue whales today weigh on average around 100 to 150 tons, with some very large females weighing up to 200 tons. These most recent estimates for Bryhotkayasaurus would place them at 110 to 170 tons, though it is stated in the paper that they were more likely around 130 tons. This would allow them to rival the blue whale in mass, and they already exceeded them in length. This species is estimated to be between 34 and 45 meters, or about 110 to 150 feet in length. And it shows us that the Mesozoic was truly a time of giants. You wouldn't want to be left alive by this dinosaur. This is Jurassic Park's Troodon. These were small pack-hunting carnivores created for the original Jurassic Park, however they were decommissioned due to safety issues. Not only were they as smart as the Velociraptor, but they also had several unique features that made them incredibly dangerous hunters. They have a tapetum lucidum, giving them extremely good night vision and making them extra creepy in the darkness. These little monsters also come equipped with some of the most dangerous venom in Jurassic Park. First, the venom triggers hallucinations, which can make even a kind creature aggressive towards its friends. After eventually triggering a violent reaction, the next stage is paralysis. During this time, females will take any living creatures they can back to their nest, where she would proceed to lay eggs inside her victim's body. At that point, all you can do is wait for the venom to trigger your brain death. Absolutely brutal. This is the most famous Allosaurus in the world, Big Al. Big Al is one of the most important Allosaurus specimens, as it's over 95% complete. Because of its completeness, Big Al is also incredibly well studied, giving us very big insight onto Allosaurus' lifestyle. The Big Al specimen is also particularly famous for all of its pathologies. These fossils tell a story showing us that 19 of his bones had damage or infection. Because of how well studied his damaged fossils are, we actually figure we have a good idea of how he died. Many of the more major injuries on his body, especially the right foot, show signs of bone infections. He showed signs of osteomyelitis, and all that damage to his right foot could have severely impacted his hunting and regular lifestyle. And it was likely this injury that ended this Allosaurus' life before he reached full maturity. And yet, despite not being an adult, Big Al would turn into one of the most important Allosauruses ever. Absolutely brilliant. Did you know that Europe has its own ceratosaur? This is Saltrio venator, a ceratosaurid from Italy. This species wasn't properly described until 2018, over 20 years after it had initially been found. Unfortunately, most of its remains are fragmentary, so we don't have a clear picture of what this animal looks like. Estimates for these guys, based on Allosaurus and Ceratosaurus, place them at about 7 to 8 meters, or 23 to 26 feet in length. If that's the case, then it would make it significantly larger than Ceratosaurus itself. But take that with a grain of salt, because without further fossils, we have no idea what its size or overall appearance was. Interestingly, Saltrio venator was thought to be a coastal animal because its fossils were found in the remains of an old sea. But unfortunately, until we find more fossil material, this creature will remain mostly a mystery. Today is the 4th of July, Independence Day in the United States, and today we're going to talk about the most American dinosaur, the bald eagle. The bald eagle can be found all over North America and even as far south as Mexico and Central America. Many people claim the bald eagle as North America's largest raptor, but that's still up for debate. The largest bald eagles can reach 15 pounds or 7 kilograms with a wingspan of about 8 feet or a little under 2.5 meters. A lot of you may have seen this photo before, and it's not photoshopped whatsoever. That's that bird's actual size. Another thing you may find surprising is that this eagle is actually a sea eagle. Aside from the winter, this species is almost always found near a body of water. Fish and other aquatic prey take up over 50% of the bald eagle's diet. Just like the osprey, they have tiny spicules on their feet that help them grip slippery fish. But don't let that fool you, they are more than capable of taking down larger prey. I mean, this is America's dinosaur we're talking about here. This is the biggest alligatorid in the world. This is the black caiman, one of South America's largest predators. Many people seem to not fully comprehend the size of this animal. The average black caiman is about 7 to 14 feet, about 2.2 to 4.3 meters. However, the largest members of this species can get over 6 meters or 20 feet in length. Many of you know that South American jaguars will hunt and kill caimans. Many people assume that the jaguar is the dominant predator of South America because of this. However, jaguars can only hunt young or small individuals, and full-grown adults have no natural predators. In fact, researchers noted that large cats like cougars and jaguars will avoid areas with large caiman in them. A full-grown male black caiman is the top of the food chain in South America, only rivaled by Orinoco and American crocodiles. So make sure you put a little respect on my man's name. You've probably heard of this shrimp-like creature before, but in case you haven't, this is Anomalocaris. These ancient arthropods lived in the Cambrian over 500 million years ago. During the Cambrian, Anomalocaris was considered gigantic, reaching 56 centimeters or nearly 2 feet. It was once thought that these shrimp-like creatures were the apex predators of their oceans. While still certainly a predator, they aren't to the degree that we once thought. We once thought that they could use this front-like appendage and combine with their mouth to crush hard-bodied prey like trilobites. However, more recent studies show that they actually would have been more likely to take soft-bodied prey. Biomechanical studies were done that shows that their jaws and front limbs weren't as strong as once thought. Instead, they would have hunted small, fast-moving, and soft-bodied animals. It's funny to me that this animal is more than twice as old as the dinosaurs, and we're still learning more and more about it. This planet is wild. This might be one of the most dangerous crocodiles that ever lived. You may have heard of him before. This is none other than Gustav the Nile crocodile. Gustav is a massive Nile crocodile from Burundi, where he lives in the Ruzizi River and Lake Tanganyika. Gustav has never been captured, so his exact size and weight are unknown, but he's estimated to be over 20 feet or 6 meters in length and weigh more than 2,000 pounds or about 910 kilograms. That being said, there are Nile crocodiles who have found to be larger than Gustav, so what makes him so important? Gustav has been reported to be a man-eater with allegedly somewhere near 200 victims. However, many of these claims have never been verified, so we don't actually know how many he's actually killed. However, in 2019, a claim surfaced that he had been killed. It was not said by who or how he was killed, and no actual concrete evidence has come forward to prove this. If he's still alive, then Gustav is likely over 80 years old at this point. And he's likely gotten even bigger. He might be lurking just around the corner. This is one of the most powerful brute wyverns in Monster Hunter. Meet the explosive Brachydios. This monster has incredibly well-developed forelimbs as well as a large battering ram-like horn on their head. What really makes this monster unique is its use of a myxomycete, or slime mold. This slime is coated on both their arms and horns, and it's extremely explosive. Whenever Brachydios attacks, its arms or horn deposit some of the slime on its victim, causing an explosion just mere moments later. When Brachydios becomes enraged, its slime takes on a bright yellow color, and then you don't have a mere moment. In this state, the slime explodes the second it stops contacting the Brachydios. Aside from the slime mold, Brachydios is an incredibly powerful and agile monster, capable of jumping distances only seen by animals like Devil Joe. And it's definitely earned its place as one of Monster Hunter's most dangerous brute wyverns. This is the largest living penguin species in the world. Adults of this species can reach 110 to 120 centimeters, or about 3.5 to 4 feet. On average, they weigh about 23 to 45 kilograms, or 50 to 100 pounds. Aside from being the largest penguin, these guys have more to them than meets the eye. These penguins have developed incredibly complex calls to assist with finding each other. In fact, they have such specific vocalization that they can recognize each other just by their calls. Out of all penguins, the emperor penguin can dive the deepest, but why? Firstly, this penguin's bones are solid, allowing them to survive much greater pressure than most other animals. They are also able to control their metabolism and shut down non-essential organs when they're diving. This allows them to dive much longer and survive on less oxygen. Another way they adapted to help with this is that their hemoglobin and myoglobin can bind with oxygen. This can allow them to remain diving even in situations where an animal would normally lose consciousness. These penguins are absolutely magnificent. Spinosaurus and Carcharodontosaurus, two of the largest carnivorous dinosaurs that ever lived. Not only that, but they also lived in the same time at the same place. So how did these two massive apex predators coexist? The simplest answer to that is niche partitioning. Carcharodontosaurus is a land-based carnivore and mostly would have hunted small to medium-sized herbivores. Spinosaurus, on the other hand, lived in and around water areas and would have mainly hunted aquatic prey. Though of course on occasions they likely would fight over food. However, Carcharodontosaurus was much more solidly built than Spinosaurus and would have been able to take larger prey, reducing their competition. And Spinosaurus could fish, a resource that Carcharodontosaurus didn't have access to. It seems even in nature, Thanos was right.
Perfectly balanced, as all things should be.
Building rock cairns is popular with hikers, but let me tell you real quick why you should stop. First and foremost, it disturbs and hurts animals. Many animals, especially those that live around water, rely on these rocks as their habitat. By removing these rocks, not only are you disturbing the homes of said animals, but also the livelihoods. Many animals, including fish and salamanders, will attach their eggs to the rocks or lay them in between the crevices. By removing these rocks, you not only potentially damage the population, but also expose the remaining eggs to any dangers around. And many of these animals rely on the rocks for cover or protection from predators. Animals aside, another major reason you should stop building these is because of erosion. By removing the rocks, you disturb the soil and speed up the erosion process. So make sure you stop building these, and if you see them in the woods, make sure to gently dismantle them. Everyone can help if everyone does their part. Paleontologists are the only reason we know so much about our prehistoric world. Personally, I don't think they get enough credit, so let's change that. Today we're going to be starting with none other than the man, the myth, the legend, Thomas R. Holtz. Holtz is one of the key figures in Tyrannosaur research, and his theories have changed the way we look at these massive carnivores. Thanks to Holtz and others like him, we now know that Tyrannosaurus rex in fact belonged to the Coelurosaurs rather than the Carnosaurs. He is also responsible for coining the term Maniraptoriforms. Holtz originally attended Johns Hopkins University before he eventually went to Yale, where he was mentored by John Ostrom. Those that don't know, John Ostrom is basically the father of modern paleontology, but we'll cover him in another future video. Because of his impressive set of knowledge, Holtz has been asked to consult for many television shows, including Walking with Dinosaurs, and the best part is, Holtz started off like many of us, a young person filled with nothing but love for our prehistoric world. He's an inspiration to every one of us out there, and I can't wait to see what else he can teach us in the future. This is one of the largest monsters in Monster Hunter, the Dolomidur. Dolomidur is a massive serpentine elder dragon that lives high in the mountains. Those of you who've played Monster Hunter World may be more familiar with this creature than you think. The location in Monster Hunter World known as the Rotten Vale is actually made out of the corpses of 2 Dolomidur. These monstrosities could reach over 1,400 feet or around 440 meters. And this creature has more than just massive size and physical power on its side. Its tongue is coated in a substance that can paralyze hunters. It can also breathe a substance that burns just like fire, but apparently isn't actual fire. And likely the oddest and most powerful ability it has is it can summon meteors from the sky. Despite their sheer power, Dolomidur doesn't venture often from their mountain range, which is why the 2 in the Vale are an oddity. Either way, Dolomidur is an elder dragon of mythical proportions. This is the fastest animal in the world that we know of. This is none other than the peregrine falcon, one of the most successful birds in the entire world. It has a near cosmopolitan distribution and can be found on almost every continent. In fact, it's so successful that there are 19 subspecies. They mainly prey on birds, and it's estimated that somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000 species are preyed upon, which is about 1/5 of the world's bird species. But what sets them apart and makes them so fast? These birds love to nest in cliffs or in tall buildings when available. These areas are perfect for updrafts, allowing them to expend less energy to climb higher into the sky. Once high enough, the peregrine will fold its wings, tuck its legs, and dive. They can reach speeds of over 200 miles per hour or 320 kilometers, with a maximum speed of 242 miles or 389 kilometers. This is literally why the term falcon punch exists. Did you know that we recently discovered this tenacious little mammal could hunt dinosaurs? This is Rapenomamus, a small triconodont species. Adults of this particular species were only around the size of an opossum, but based on the fossils, I'd say its attitude is more like a honey badger. A recent fossil find from China shows this vicious little mammal attacking a Psittacosaurus. For those of you that don't know, Psittacosaurus was a relatively small ceratopsian dinosaur. This particular individual was around 4 feet or 1.2 meters long, meaning it was about 3 times the size of the Rapenomamus. Despite that, Rapenomamus was seated atop the Psittacosaurus with its claws dug in and its teeth in its ribs. It's suspected that during this hunt, the 2 fighting creatures were buried in volcanic mudflow, entombing yet another amazing duel for the history books. Did you know that the worst extinction in our planet's history is known as the Great Dying? This was the Permian-Triassic extinction event about 251 million years ago. This extinction wiped out over 80% of all life on Earth. But what caused all this death and destruction? Currently, it's assumed to be a combination of factors. First was one of the largest volcanic events in the Earth's history, covering a swath of land the size of Saudi Arabia in lava. This caused carbon dioxide levels to jump drastically, up to 5 times faster than ever before. This higher level of carbon dioxide caused temperatures all across the globe to shoot up. Prior to these events, the world had an average temperature of about 64 degrees Fahrenheit or 18 degrees Celsius. This new and lethal level of carbon dioxide shot global temperatures up to 35 degrees Celsius or about 95 degrees Fahrenheit. And all of this and more contributed to the greatest dying the world has ever seen. Paleontologists don't get enough credit, so let's change that. This is a brilliant man known as Stephen Broussat. Broussat was born and raised in Illinois, where he'd eventually attend the University of Chicago. Here, he studied geophysical science under another famous paleontologist, Paul Sereno. Broussat was exceptional and eventually became a student marshal and got a Marshall Scholarship, allowing him to attend university overseas. It was here at the University of Bristol he'd get his actual paleontology degree. Afterwards, he attended the University of Columbia back here in the US to get his PhD. Over the course of his career, Broussat has discovered over a dozen new species. This includes the second species of Carcharodontosaurus, the Chinese Tyrannosaur Kinjiaosaurus, and the African abelisaurid Cryptops. And that's just barely scratching the surface of the amazing things this man has done for the scientific world. If you don't believe that the dinosaurs are still around, look no further than the secretary bird. These predatory African birds stand at around 4 feet or 1.3 meters tall, with a wingspan of about 6 to 7 feet or 1.8 to 2.2 meters. Those wings are still put to excellent use because they can still fly. Despite the ability to fly, they spend most of their time hunting on the ground. Secretary birds have extremely long legs in comparison to their body mass. When they sense prey nearby, they start stomping around in an attempt to flush it out. When they do, they run their prey down and begin to stomp on it. Studies done on this stomping motion shows that they mostly
Gone for the head.
Despite being a large bird and a skilled hunter, unfortunately, these guys are still endangered. And unfortunately, their main threat is habitat loss. And hopefully, we can all come together to help protect and preserve this amazing species. Did you know that there's American crocodiles? You may not have heard of them because they're not super common in the US anymore. While they used to be found all across the southern United States, nowadays they're only found on the southern tip of Florida. Beyond that, however, they do have populations all along Central and South America. Like their cousin the saltwater crocodile, these guys have a high tolerance to salt or salinity in the water. Because of this species is most often found in coastal areas. The largest record of an American crocodile that I could find placed them at almost 16 feet or 4.8 meters. However, there are reports of animals getting up to 20 feet or 6 meters plus in length. This particular 16-footer was around 540 kilograms or about 1,200 pounds. The most likely reason you haven't heard of them is because they only have a population of around 2,000 or less in the United States. They used to be hunted for their skin and meat, but now it's illegal to hunt them in the US. And thanks to the laws in place to help them, their population has begun to recover. And hopefully, in a few years, the species will be back in full swing. This is the lizard earthquake god, one of the largest North American sauropods to ever exist. This is none other than Sauroposeidon. They were one of the last North American giants until sauropods disappeared for 40 million years from North America. They were massive animals, reaching anywhere from 89 to 112 feet or 27 to 34 meters. At those sizes, it would weigh somewhere between 40 to 70 tons. As adults, these giants have no natural predators, but as juveniles, they still had to watch out for Acrocanthosaurus. These giants used to live along the southern parts of the United States, like Oklahoma and Texas. In fact, they're the state dinosaur of Texas. During the time of Sauroposeidon, its environment would have been very similar to modern-day Louisiana, with coastal swamps, bayous, and lagoons. And you already know, much like Shrek, they definitely don't want anyone in their swamp. This is one of the most legendary paleontologists of all time. Meet my favorite paleontologist, Robert T. Bakker. At 8 years old, he became interested in dinosaurs, and many years later, he'd attend college at Yale University. At Yale, he studied under John Ostrom, and eventually he went on to Harvard to earn his PhD. But without even knowing it, Bakker and his mentor Ostrom were about to change paleontology forever. Ostrom's discovery of Deinonychus caused him and Bakker to begin the dinosaur renaissance. The Renaissance revolutionized the way we look at dinosaurs, and it's why we know that they're warm-blooded. Bakker was at the forefront of this and one of the major proponents that dinosaurs were in fact warm-blooded. And it's because of him and others like him that we know dinosaurs didn't stand or walk like this with their tails dragging behind them. Bakker continues to educate the public today, currently serving as the curator of the Houston Museum of Natural Sciences, and there might still be so much more that he can teach us. I've come to realize that many people don't comprehend just how big sauropods are. So let's fix that. We're going to use Dreadnoughtus as an example because they're the biggest sauropod known from fairly complete remains, weighing in at around 50 tons. That's about 100,000 pounds or 45,300 kilograms. That's as much as a Boeing 720 airplane, or 3 of Europe's double-decker buses. That's the equivalent of 5 semi-trucks without their trailers. Or if you'd rather go the animal route, that's about 5 orcas or 5 tyrannosaurs. Dreadnoughtus is equal to about 7 African elephants. That's a whole herd. But let's do a couple more fun comparisons. They weigh as much as 24 average cars, or as much as 50 saltwater crocodiles. Shaq is a large human being, but it would still take 309 of him to weigh the same. And for all you deer lovers out there, they would weigh the same as about 665 deer. So just remember, as big as you think they are, they're probably bigger. Everybody talks about the T-Rex and its bone-shattering bite. Breaking bones is a vital part of the Tyrannosaur's hunting style, and I think that makes people forget that other dinosaurs had powerful bites too. Tyrannosaurus rex has a bite force of 12,800 psi, and the human's thickest bone, the temporal bone, only requires 1,875 psi to break. With that in mind, here's some other carnivores that can break your bones. Giganotosaurus with a bite force of 6,000 psi. Acrocanthosaurus with a bite force of 5,000 psi. Spinosaurus with a bite force of 4,200 psi. And last but certainly not least, the Dromaeosaur deinonychus at 4,000 psi. Just a casual reminder that the human body is much more frail than you realize. This is one of Minnesota and Canada's most famous modern dinosaurs. This is the common loon. Loons, like penguins, are an extremely aquatic species and have acquired several adaptations to allow this lifestyle. Like penguins, they don't have the best mobility on land, mostly because a loon's feet are set further back on their body than most other birds. This aids them in swimming and allows them to go much faster underwater. Because of this, they also have to do a running start from the water to take off. They do this because they need the momentum taking off, because most of their bones aren't hollow like other birds. Of course, that's another adaptation to an aquatic lifestyle. Two of my favorite things about them are their red eyes and their extremely eerie call. Personally, hearing their call early in the morning on the lake, perfect, nothing beats it. This is the Pinocchio Rex. Meet Cheonjiaosaurus, a tyrannosaur from the late Cretaceous of Asia. They're not the biggest tyrannosaur, but certainly not the smallest, reaching about 20 feet or 6 meters in length. Cheonjiaosaurus is actually part of a group of specialized tyrannosaurs known as the Aleoramini, unlike their very large cousins, dinosaurs. Here's some unsettling facts about dinosaurs. Tyrannosaurus rex is a massive 10-ton predator. Despite their massive size, they were still a stealthy hunter thanks to cushioned pads on their feet, allowing them to sneak up on any unsuspecting prey. You wouldn't know the rex is there until it's too late. Nowadays, we know that Allosaurus hunts and kills its prey in a similar manner to hawks. This means the unfortunate prey is getting pinned down and ripped apart and eaten while it's still alive. Everybody underestimates herbivores, but many herbivorous dinosaurs had large beaks similar to birds, meaning a little nip from them could very well mean a lost arm. Dinosaurs are truly terrifying and magnificent creatures. Glowing bright red and flying at high speeds, this is the Argent Comet. This is a powerful elder dragon from Monster Hunter known as Valstrax. Valstrax is unique amongst elder dragons because of its trident-shaped wings. They have holes in their chest that serve as a chest vent for taking in air. This air then combines with Valstrax's energy, allowing the dragon to expel it similar to a jet engine. This allows Valstrax to fly so fast that it breaks the sound barrier. However, when it's not flying at high speeds, it's capable of using that energy in its wings to attack. They can do so in the form of spears, projectiles, and even giant claws. Their most dangerous move may remind a couple of you of General Radon. Valstrax will intake as much air as possible before leaping off into the horizon. Here, it becomes covered in red energy, giving it a fiery comet-like appearance, which is where it gets its name, before flying back to their opponent at over Mach 1 to deliver a devastating blow. Absolutely brilliant. I'm convinced that ornithologists are just way too down bad, because here are some more of the most ridiculous bird names in the world. Guidelines, please leave me alone, these are actual bird names. The Himalayan snowcock. I don't even know how to react to that one. The somber tit, though I think they prefer the term goth. You know whoever named this one was an emo kid. The smew. I don't know why, but I feel like that name is more of an insult than anything else. The European shag. That sounds more like an experience than a bird. The dickcissel. Just why? And last, but certainly not least, caca. I swear, some of y'all take these poop jokes way too far. But apparently not as far as scientists take the largest crocodilian in the world, the infamous saltwater crocodile. The largest recorded saltwater crocodile was 20 feet 4 inches, or just over 6 meters. However, based on several extremely large skulls that have been found, we estimate that this species can reach up to 23 feet, or about 7 meters. Large males of this species can weigh over a ton, with the largest specimens weighing nearly double. You see, one of the most interesting things about crocodiles is they don't grow the way you expect them to. After a certain point, crocodiles stop growing as fast linearly, which means they don't get as long, but they still get bulkier. This is why the 20-foot lolong weighed just shy of 2,500 pounds, and why a 17-footer can weigh nearly 1,000 pounds less. If you know square cube law, kind of apply that to this situation. That's also why their growth slows down after a certain age as well. Regardless, these are massive and powerful predators that deserve our respect. No, this isn't an eldritch abomination, it's a bird. This is the African jacana, and a lot of people are both terrified and confused by these.
Allow me to shed some light on the subject.
It almost looks like it has a bunch of extra feet, right? In actuality, those are baby jacana. Jacanas are incredibly successful birds, which has led to them being polyandrous, which means the mom has multiple partners while the male raises the chicks. However, these newly hatched chicks don't have the easiest time getting around the shallow lakes of their parents, so the males have developed a brilliant way to carry them around under their wings. They literally pick them up with their wings and stuff them in there like a backpack. So while this image may look terrifying, it's actually a good parent, which is adorable in its own right. This is the father of modern paleontology. This is none other than John Ostrom. Born in New York in 1928, he originally wanted to be a physician like his father. However, he read a book called The Meaning of Evolution, and that changed his mind. Obtaining his degree from Union College and Columbia University, his career eventually took him to teaching at Yale. However, of course, Ostrom is most famous for his work with dinosaurs. In particular, he's very famous for Deinonychus. Ostrom's discovery of Deinonychus revolutionized the way we look at dinosaurs. Ostrom and his students like Robert T. Backer showed that Deinonychus was a fast and swift hunter and likely warm-blooded. Though his theories were challenged, he was eventually proven right, changing our view on dinosaurs from slow and sluggish lizards to large and fast birds. Ostrom would continue to teach paleontology for the rest of his life until his unfortunate death in 2005. But before he died, he secured his place as one of the most important paleontologists in history. This is the biggest bear in history that we know of. This is Arctotherium, but you might know them better as the short-faced bear. These North American giants could reach massive sizes, with the largest males reaching up to 2,600 pounds or about 1,200 kilograms. However, one particular specimen was thought to reach even bigger. This monstrous specimen was thought to reach anywhere from 3,500 to 3,800 pounds or 1,600 to 1,750 kilograms, which means the height of this beast could reach up to 14 feet or 4.3 meters standing upright. Now, don't get me wrong, bears are terrifying today, but for the most part, unless they're desperate, they'll leave you alone. The tooth wear of Arctotherium showed that while it was omnivorous, it was also a very active carnivore. And you guys know me, I love all animals, even bears, but they are one of the only animals that truly terrify me. So let's just be thankful we don't got these tanks running around anymore. These are some of my favorite creators on any platform. It should come as no surprise that my videos are heavily influenced by these two. You may know this gentleman as Mamadou or Casual Geographic. And this, of course, is Lindsay Nicole. These two creators have very similar videos, though they both have their own style. They are my main inspiration behind DinoFax and some of the best animal creators on any platform. Another great animal guy is Fishing Garrett here on TikTok. This is the man who's always in the Florida Everglades interacting with animals and teaching people about them. And he does absolutely brilliant work. A very entertaining channel that often has stuff to do with dinosaurs is Goji Center. Their videos are incredibly fun to watch and a great way to relax after a long day. I wanted to give a huge shout out to all these creators because many of them I get inspiration from, and from the bottom of my heart, thank you. But honestly, I'm curious, who are your favorite creators? Make sure to tag them in the comments below. Giganotosaurus was one of the largest carnivorous dinosaurs. We've talked about their strength and power in the past, but let's dive a little deeper. Giganotosaurus, much like other carnosaurs, was considered a very active predator. Currently, we believe they hunted a wide variety of smaller prey. When we look at the jaws of Giganotosaurus and many other Carcharodontosaurids, we see that they're longer than most other theropods. These longer jaws would distribute the mass more evenly and allow them to close their mouths quicker, which was exactly their game plan. Giganotosaurus would deliver quick, powerful, and slashing bites with their knife-like teeth, We also believe that they were homeothermic with a metabolism equivalent of a 1-ton mammal, enabling them to grow extremely fast comparatively. Coupling those together, we see that this predator would have to eat an enormous amount of food, and they had the right tools to do so. A complex yet simple and brilliant animal. This modern dinosaur is known as the B. rex, more commonly called the shoebill stork. They're rather tall birds, reaching about 3.5 to 5 feet or 1 to 1.5 meters. Their wingspan is even more impressive, reaching up to 8.5 feet or 260 centimeters. But this dinosaur's most notable feature is its massive beak. They have one of the most robust and the third longest bill of any bird. They use these bills to communicate with one another, clacking them together. And I mean, let's be honest, this sounds completely unnatural. It sounds almost like a machine gun. They use these massive and powerful bills to hunt, usually for large fish. And the size of their beak actually allows them to take larger prey than most other storks. But despite their incredibly fearsome appearance, these guys are actually incredibly docile towards humans. Though I can definitely see why some folks are terrified of this majestic and amazing bird. This is the famous pug croc Cymosuchus. These guys are rather unusual as far as crocodiles are concerned. They weren't very big, only about 2.5 feet long or 3/4 of a meter. But they have a few key distinguishing features. The name Cymosuchus literally means pug-nosed crocodile, and it certainly is. Its entire body is shorter and stockier than what you'd expect from a normal crocodilian. Another major difference is that these little buggers are herbivores. Their teeth were shaped like maple leaves and would have been excellent for processing tough plant material. But in my opinion, their most interesting feature is their armor. The armor of Cymosuchus is tightly locked together, creating a sort of paravertebral shield on its back. This much armor would restrict their movement, however, which is why it's thought that they may have been burrowing animals to help protect themselves. Sure, they may not be the biggest or the strongest, but they're definitely one of the most unique. Let's talk Tarbosaurus. This large Asian tyrannosaur has often been lumped together with Tyrannosaurus rex itself. However, there's quite a few distinct features on both. Tarbosaurus was slightly smaller than T-Rex, reaching up to 10 to 12 meters or 33 to 40 feet. But to distinguish these animals better, let's take a look at their skulls. The skull of Tarbosaurus isn't as wide as a Rex, giving them an overall weaker bite force. Instead of powerful crushing jaws, their lower jaw had a unique locking mechanism that isn't shared with any other tyrannosaur except for Aeolramus. Their upper jaw would have also been incredibly rigid thanks to various well-developed bones in their skull. Where Tyrannosaur used its powerful crushing bite to hunt animals like Triceratops and Ankylosaurs, Tarbosaurus would have used this jaw-locking mechanism to hunt sauropods. And I've got to admit, a sauropod hunting Tyrannosaur is pretty impressive. This is the world's largest living eagle. Meet the Stellar sea eagle. These massive birds have wingspans up to 8 feet or 2.5 meters long, and they can weigh upwards of 10 kilograms, nearly 25 pounds. That being said, some notable individuals in Philippine and harpy eagles have been known to reach around this size as well. But on average, Stellars beats them out almost every time. Like other fish eagles, these guys have tiny spicules or spikes on their feet to help them grip slippery prey. Fish, of course, are their most common prey, and they seem to favor pink and chum salmon. These seafaring birds are often found on the coasts of East Asia. They spend the breeding season typically in Russia before moving south for the winter into areas like China, Korea, and Japan. Though there is one notable individual who has been seen all across North America. And if anything, all that proves is that these eagles are truly some of the best. This is one of the most famous crocodilians in the world, the American alligator. They are some big boys with large males reaching up to 15 feet or 4.6 meters and weighing around 1,100 pounds or 500 kilograms. There have been claims of even larger alligators, but none of those have been verified. Despite not being verified, Everglades National Park claims that there was an alligator there that was 17.5 feet or about 5.3 meters. And while it's not common, it's certainly capable that an alligator could reach this size. These guys live all across southern United States, and in Florida they're considered a keystone species. The reason for this is that alligators can dramatically alter their landscape by creating what are known as alligator holes. Alligator holes are incredibly important because during the dry season they retain a good amount of water, creating small ponds. Aside from alligators, these small ponds allow other species to flourish as well, and without alligators, some of those species might not survive at all, showing that these crocodilians are truly special. Did you know that there's a confirmed female T-Rex? And no, I'm not talking about Sue, because we don't know for sure if Sue was male or female. This is B. rex, or Bob Rex, in honor of Bob Harmon, who found the specimen. B. rex isn't the most complete Tyrannosaur specimen, but what makes it so special is its soft tissue. This tissue was preserved through a process called pre-mineralization. This is where minerals are deposited into soft tissue, causing them to fossilize. In the case of B. rex, the soft tissue preserved is something known as medullary tissue. In the modern era, medullary tissue can only be found in one group of animals, female birds. Birds use medullary tissue as a source of calcium to create the eggs within their body, which means that the B. rex here was getting ready to be a mother when she died. But it also gave us our first conclusive female tyrannosaur. And honestly, I think that is a pretty big achievement in itself. What is one of the coolest dinosaur facts you know? I'll go first. At this point, everybody knows about Spinosaurus, and if you don't, what are you, living under a rock? And it's easy to see that Spinosaurids bear a close resemblance to crocodilians. But it seems that they share more than just a superficial resemblance. You may know that crocodilians have pressure sensors, allowing them to detect movement within the water. While a crocodilian's is incredibly extensive, it's thought that Spinosaurus also had pressure sensors, but just on the snout. They connect to the outside of the animal's body through small holes called foramina. In both groups of animals, it allows them to find prey without expending too much energy. While we're unsure how sensitive Spinosaurus' sensors were, we know that crocodilians can detect even a hair falling into the water, making Spinosaurus a true nightmare for any aquatic creatures. This is probably the angriest monkey you'll ever see, fictional or otherwise. This is Rajang, one of the most powerful beasts in Monster Hunter. This beast is so powerful that it regularly competes with and hunts elder dragons like Kirin. In fact, in terms of brute strength, only Nergigante is a match. Rajang regularly hunts Kirins for their horns, which grant them a powerful lightning ability. They hold so much power that even elder dragons will avoid them, but there is one animal that actively seeks Rajang, and that would be its only real competitor that's not an elder dragon, Savage Devil Joe. In terms of power and tenacity, Devil Joe can match Rajang blow for blow, but Rajang is much more intelligent and uses that to its advantage. Its higher intelligence and agility allow it to outmaneuver Devil Joe at almost every turn, and more often than not defeat the larger creature. And all that without even going into how powerful their lightning really can be. You can think of him like Monster Hunter's King Kong, but much more aggressive. Direwolves are a mystical creature of fantasy, but they were also a very real animal. Many people seem to think that direwolves are essentially just a large offshoot of wolves, but current research shows that they're technically not even wolves as we know them. Wolves, like dogs, are part of the group known as Canis. Direwolves, on the other hand, are separate from the family known as canids and are actually more closely related to African jackals. The similarity between direwolves and grey wolves is thought to be an example of convergent evolution. The current consensus is that direwolves split off from the group that would eventually become Canis about 6 million years ago, before eventually becoming the direwolves we know and love today, and inspiring some pretty cool things out of fantasy. Have you heard of the Ghost and the Darkness? These are two lions more commonly known as the Tsavo man-eaters. They have a very grisly history. In early 1898, the British began a railway project in Kenya led by Colonel John Henry Patterson. Shortly after his arrival, two maneless male lions began to hunt the railway workers. Early on in the attacks, only a single lion would enter the camp at a time, dragging off their unlucky victim. But as the lions grew bolder, they would both enter the camp, each taking a victim. They tried setting traps, and to defend themselves, they created thorn fences called bomas. But the lions got past it all, causing hundreds of workers to flee. It wouldn't be until December of that year that both lions were found and killed. And by that time, they had claimed the lives of anywhere between 30 and 140 people, cementing their place as some of the most dangerous man-eaters in history. Here are 3 horrifying ways the dinosaurs could end you. At number 3, we've got being impaled. Several dinosaurs like Stegosaurus and Triceratops came equipped with long horns or spikes. Stegosaurus could likely aim with some precision, taking out vital parts of your body. Meanwhile, a Triceratops hitting you is like getting hit by a semi-truck with a spike on the front. At number 2, we've got shredded. When talking about carnivorous dinosaurs, everybody usually talks about the full-grown adults. When it comes to humans, juveniles would be way worse. Juvenile Carcharodontosaurids, like their parents, had incredibly sharp, shark-like teeth. These teeth were perfect for shredding flesh. They'd likely take a multitude of shallow bites, shredding your skin and flesh. In my opinion, one of the worst ways to get killed by a dinosaur is number 1, eaten alive. Raptors are traditionally thought to be pack hunters, but nowadays we know that they hunted using a method called the RPR. In this model, they would jump on the back of their prey, digging their claws in and weakening their prey with their jaws. By the time they're done, you'll be too weak to fight back and will only be able to lay there as they eat you alive. Meet a brand new and important dinosaur, Fujian Venator. These guys lived 150 million years ago in what is modern-day Fujian province, China. These guys are part of the family known as Anchiornithidae, making them one of the earliest birds. Like most birds, they were rather small, weighing around 1.5 pounds or 640 grams. Unlike later birds, these guys weren't able to fly, but instead had incredibly long legs similar to a roadrunner. Like the roadrunner, those long legs could help them chase down small and fast prey, or it could have allowed them to wade through swamps and rivers much like modern cranes do today. This can be used to show the diversification of birds very early on, because while Fujian venator is a ground dweller, other birds were already starting to take to the trees and skies, and it helps us fill in some of the gaps in bird evolution. It might come as a surprise, but this is the largest flying bird on the planet. Allow me to introduce the wandering albatross. They are surprisingly large, with wingspans up to 12 feet or 3.7 meters and weighing up to 30 pounds, around 13 kilograms. They have such a long wingspan because they spend a majority of their life in the air above the sea. Based on what we can tell, these birds will rarely land for anything other than to breed and to feed. And they can stay in flight for quite some time, with one individual recorded to have flown 3,700 miles or around 6,000 kilometers in just 12 days. Like all birds, their bones are incredibly light but also incredibly strong due to being pneumaticized. Because of this, the Maori used to hunt them and use their bones as tools like needles and fish hooks. Unfortunately, today, these guys are vulnerable because of bad fishing practices and pollution. And hopefully we can all come together and preserve this amazing species for all the future generations. This is the namesake to one of the most interesting groups of carnivorous dinosaurs. Meet the impressive Abelisaurus. They could reach up to 24 feet or 7.5 meters in length, and they could weigh up to 2 tons. They were discovered in 1983, and in 1985 they were named by a man named Roberto Abel. Abelisaurus was named after its discoverer, with its name meaning Abel's lizard. But it wasn't actually named by Abel himself, it was named by his colleagues Jose Bonaparte and Fernando Novas. Abelisaurus was the first of its family discovered, and Bonaparte and Novas named the entire family after this species as well. Unlike other members of its family, Abelisaurus had no horns or crest that fossilized at least. However, there are ridges on the snout and eyes that could have supported crests in life. Regardless, this is an impressive carnivore, and its naming led to an entire family of amazing dinosaurs. Some folks believe that these are all dinosaurs, and let me explain to you why they're not. The easiest ones to separate are the marine reptiles like Mosasaurus. Mosasaurus and its relatives are part of the group known as Squamata, meaning they're more closely related to snakes and lizards. Essentially, you can think of them as giant aquatic monitor lizards, meaning they're not even closely related to dinosaurs. Now with the other two, pterosaurs and crocodilians, here's where things get a little more complicated. Dinosaurs, pterosaurs, and crocodilians are all part of the same group known as archosaurs. Early in the Triassic, 2 new groups of archosaurs showed up, the Pseudosuchia and the Ava metatarsilia. The Pseudosuchia split off and eventually became the crocodilians we know and love today. By the middle of the Triassic, the Ava metatarsilia had split into multiple groups. The most successful of these groups were dinosaurs and pterosaurs, which evolved about 15 million years apart. This makes pterosaurs the dinosaurs' closest relatives, but not true dinosaurs themselves. I hope that helped clear up any confusion. At this point, you've probably heard of the now legendary killer croc, Gustav. Did you know that there was a movie that's somewhat based on him? This is 2007's Primeval. The movie follows a disgraced journalist and a reporter as they are sent to write a story about the killer crocodile. Killer crocodile he is because Gustav in this movie is no small fry. The real Gustav is a massive animal thought to be over 20 feet or 6 meters in length and weigh more than a ton. The film makes him a true monster with his head nearly the size of a person, and let's do some quick calculations here. The real Gustav is thought to have a skull length of about 30 inches and a body length of around 20 feet or 6 meters. We're gonna lowball here and say that this crocodile has a 5-foot or 60-inch skull. If you know crocodilians, you know that after a certain age, they stop growing as fast lengthwise. Instead, they begin to put on mass and become much bulkier and more powerful creatures. Even so, Gustav appears to be at least 30 feet or 9.1 meters in length here, giving us moviegoers a taste of the crocodilians of old. This is one of the most dinosaur-looking birds that can be found alive today. Meet the Hoatzin, a tropical South American bird. These birds are about the same size as a pheasant, just over 2 feet or about 65 centimeters. One of the most interesting things about this species is their young. Young Hoatzin are born with claws on their wings, reminiscent of dinosaurs like Archaeopteryx. These claws are used to climb in and around trees before their flight feathers came in. By the time a Hoatzin reaches full maturity, they've lost those claws and their wings have come in full. Even so, they're not the best flyers and are actually rather clumsy in the air, which can most likely be attributed to the dense jungles they live in. Regardless of how clumsy they are, these guys are true dinosaurs. This is an incredibly interesting stegosaurid. Meet Miragaia, a stegosaur from Jurassic Portugal. Miragaia is a fairly advanced stegosaur, and it's actually thought to be fairly closely related to Stegosaurus itself. However, these guys differ from their more famous cousins in more way than one. They're only slightly smaller than Stegosaurus, reaching up to 20 feet or 6 meters in length. But Miragaia is incredibly lightly built for a stegosaurid and only weighs around 2 tons. Aside from their weight, their neck is another distinguishing feature. Miragaia has the longest neck of any stegosaur with at least 17 vertebrae. Only some sauropods like Mamenchisaurus had that many vertebrae in their neck. Why they had such a long neck, we're still not entirely sure, but we assume it has to do with feeding. Either way, these are definitely one unique and interesting stegosaurid. The tropical rain fell in great drenching sheets, hammering the corrugated roof of the clinic in Bahia Anasco. It was nearly midnight, power had been lost in the storm, and the midwife, Elena Morales, was working by flashlight when she heard a squealing, chirping sound. Thinking that it was a rat, she quickly put a compress on the forehead of the mother and went in the next room to check on the newborn baby. As her hand touched the doorknob, she heard the chirping again, and she relaxed. Evidently, it was just a bird, flying in the window to get out of the rain. Costa Ricans said that when a bird came to visit a newborn child, it brought good luck. Elena opened the door. The infant lay in a wicker bassinet, swaddled in a light blanket, only its face exposed. Around the rim of the bassinet, 3 dark green lizards crouched like gargoyles. When they saw Elena, they cocked their heads and stared curiously at her, but did not flee. In the light of her flashlight, Elena saw the blood dripping from their snouts. Softly chirping, one lizard bent down and with a quick shake of its head tore a ragged chunk of flesh from the baby. Elena rushed forward, screaming, and the lizards fled into the darkness, but long before she could reach the bassinet, she could see what had happened to the infant's face, and she knew the child must be dead. The lizards scattered into the rainy night, chirping and squealing, leaving behind only bloodied 3-toed tracks like birds. This, in my opinion, is the cutest type of owl. These are burrowing owls, one of the smallest owl species in the world. The largest of these guys typically reach only about 11 inches or 28 centimeters in length. As their name suggests, these guys spend a lot of time in and around their burrows and as a consequence on the ground. To adapt to this, they grew incredibly long legs, which also allow them to run to a certain degree. Like all owls, these guys are vicious little predators, but they tend to favor insects like crickets and grasshoppers, though they will take some larger prey, even going after birds as large as doves and sparrows. Outside of North America, these guys are incredibly successful and can be found almost everywhere in South America. But unfortunately, here in North America, these guys are in danger. There are 2 major reasons for this, one being loss of habitat and the other being loss of animals that they depend on. Most burrowing owls actually can't dig their own burrows and rely on other animals to dig it for them. These animals, like prairie dogs and ground squirrel, are declining in population themselves because of farmland. And hopefully we can come together to prevent their localized extinction. Dakota raptor is one of the largest raptor species to have ever existed, reaching up to 6 meters or 20 feet in length. Or is it? In case you haven't heard, there's been a large-scale debate going on within the paleontological community over the validity. This debate started because of a blog post by an Italian paleontologist named Andrew Cow. Cow, along with others, believed that the initial material described to Dakota raptor actually describes several other specimens, which would leave Dakota raptor as a chimera and likely a dubious species. However, there are some problems on both sides. Firstly, Cow has a tendency to over-exaggerate things, and he's never exactly worked with the Dakota raptor specimen himself. The main issue comes from Dakota raptor's discoverer and the person who named it, Robert De Palma. De Palma has been a part of many controversies. The one we're focusing on is the fact that he doesn't let anyone else have access to his fossil collection. To me, that suggests he has something to hide, because why else wouldn't he allow other scientists to study the material? While nothing is set in stone, it does unfortunately look like Dakota raptor will become invalid. But perhaps they will shed some more light on the other species that their bones are a part of. This is one of the most famous crocodiles in existence and the largest at Australia Zoo, Acco. This absolutely legendary crocodile was captured single-handedly by Steve Irwin in 1988. Because of how close he was to civilization and his tendency to be a problem croc, people wanted to shoot him, but Steve refused that and spent 2 years searching for him. Eventually, using a boar and some buoys, Steve managed to lure Acco into a trap. Despite all his precautions, Acco fought so hard that his boat sunk, and it was only by luck that he managed to tie the rope to a four-wheeler and drag Acco out of the water and into a trap. Since then, Acco has become a permanent part of Australia Zoo and has become their largest crocodile at 17 feet, just over 5 meters in length, and 2,200 pounds, or around 1,000 kilograms. And I believe that his enclosure is where Steve first proposed to Terry back in 1991. Acco has only been moved once since Steve first caught him, and it took the entire zoo basically to do it, which shows just how legendary both Acco and Steve Irwin are. This is the last American titan, Alamosaurus. A titan it certainly was, as this animal could reach up to 85 feet or 26 meters in length and weigh more than 40 tons. They emerged seemingly out of nowhere after sauropods had disappeared from North America for over 30 million years. Alamosaurus quickly became one of the top herbivores in the southern United States. These massive animals even have osteoderms for extra protection against predators, which they'd certainly need in their younger stages, as their main predators would have been tyrannosaurs. These behemoths were thought to roam the inland plains of North America during the late Cretaceous, and they were the last sauropods seen in North America that we know of. A truly brilliant animal, and if you'd like to learn more about them, make sure to check out this video here. This is the largest millipede that ever lived that we know of. This is Arthropleura, a massive millipede from Carboniferous Europe and North America. These massive creatures could reach upwards of 8 feet, up to 2.5 meters in length. Despite their size, these massive arthropods were thought to be herbivores, which isn't all that surprising when you know it's a millipede and not a centipede. We used to believe that high levels of oxygen during the Carboniferous is why these guys got to such enormous sizes. However, Arthropleura can be found all the way to the end of the Carboniferous, when oxygen was much more similar to what it is today, which suggests that high oxygen may not have been the cause of their gigantism. Some folks believe that this may also be part to the lack of terrestrial predators during this time. With very little capable of hunting them, there would be no restriction on how large Arthropleura could grow. A truly fascinating and ancient species. This is the horrible hand, one of the oddest dinosaurs to have ever been discovered, Deinocheirus. They are the largest member of the family known as ornithomimids, and they are massive indeed, reaching up to 36 feet or 11 meters in length with a weight of up to 7 tons. Their name comes from their incredibly long arms, the longest of any bipedal dinosaur, which came equipped with 3 blunt claws on the end. These arms could reach up to 8 feet in length, almost 2.5 meters. Despite their claws' fearsome appearance, they were most likely used for digging up plants. These guys would spend a lot of time in the water, where they would eat both plants and fish. While they don't have a lot of jaw power, they have a significant amount of space in that massive beak. This beak is similar in shape to a duck, and it's thought that they would have used it to crop soft underwater vegetation. And perhaps that large pouch-like space could have been used similar to a pelican to hold fish and other animals. Because of their lack of teeth, these animals ate gastroliths to help them process and break down their food. All these traits and more show us that Deinocheirus was one weird, wacky, and brilliant dinosaur. This is Steve Irwin's favorite crocodile, Agro. His legendary aggression is what earned him his famous name and Steve's affection. According to the family, Agro is still the hardest hitting croc at the zoo. Agro is also one of the largest crocs at the zoo, reaching upwards of 15 feet or 4.5 meters in length and weighing upwards of 1,300 pounds, around 600 kilograms. In the late 1980s, Agro became a problem crocodile after he began harassing boats and even other crocs. While searching for Agro, Steve also found the corpse of a 10-foot or 3-meter croc that had allegedly been killed by Agro. Luckily, Steve managed to capture him in a trap and get him secured to his boat, but the problems didn't end there. Agro damaged every means of transporting him back to the zoo, including the boat and several boxes. But even after all those complications, Steve still managed to get Agro back to the zoo. He certainly earned that name, with Steve saying that he killed 2 lawnmowers, a brush hook, a shovel, a shoe, and his hat in his quest to remove him from his territory. Just like the man who captured him, Agro is an absolute legend. This is the Lord of the Seas, a massive leviathan from Monster Hunter, Lagiacrus. These massive aquatic monsters could get up to 108 feet or around 33 meters in length. They are one of the top predators in their ecosystem, with only elder dragons above them. These leviathans spend a majority of their time in deep water, using electricity to hunt their prey. They use their long, streamlined bodies to create whirlpools around their prey, effectively trapping them and allowing them to shock them with ease. These whirlpools have even been noted to sink ships. Each of their dorsal spines houses an electrical sac at the bottom, allowing them to expel electricity through these spines. When this electricity is released, it can combine with mucus in the mouth, allowing Lagiacrus to use lightning projectiles. Stronger Lagiacrus can even use their lightning as a shield, bending it around them to surround themselves with electricity. Just because these guys prefer to stay in the water doesn't mean they aren't also incredibly dangerous on land, giving us one of this series' most intriguing monsters. This is one of the largest birds of prey in the entire world, the Andean condor. These massive birds can stand upwards of 130 centimeters, over 4 feet tall, with a wingspan over 10 feet or 3 meters in length. With a weight of 15 kilograms or about 33 pounds, they're one of the heaviest flyers alive. All condors, including the Andean condors, are scavengers, primarily eating carrion. In just one day, they can cover 120 miles or 200 kilometers in search of food. While they're not really capable of taking down their own prey, they are known to bully predators off of theirs, such as the puma. A multitude of condors will group together to harass the puma and drive them away from their kill. Strength in numbers, I suppose. Unfortunately, because of humans, these guys are endangered, though not as badly as their California cousins. There seems to be a major misconception in South America that these birds will attack and kill livestock, which is simply not true. These birds are not built to be hunters, let alone taking down animals as large as cows and sheep. Perhaps with a little more education, people will want to protect and preserve these amazing birds. Ankylosaurus is famous for being one of the most well-defended herbivores of all time. But some folks seem to believe that as an adult, these guys would be almost impossible to take down. And I'm here to tell you that's simply just not true. Aside from their most glaring weak point, which is their underbelly, Ankylosaurus is basically armored on the entirety of its body. Its armor is made of osteoderms, which itself is made up of collagen fibers interwoven together like Kevlar. And while this is incredibly powerful armor, it's not impervious. You see, Tyrannosaurus rex had specifically evolved to hunt down these large armored herbivores like Triceratops and Ankylosaurus. I see images around all the time of Tyrannosaurs breaking their teeth when trying to bite Ankylosaurus, but I'll tell you right now that that's wrong. At its strongest, a Tyrannosaur bite can exert over 12,000 pounds of force, which is more than enough to get through an Ankylosaurus's armor. Ankylosaurus would certainly not be an easy kill, but they're definitely not invincible. This is the rarest crocodilian in the world, the Orinoco crocodile. They're a relatively large species, with males today reaching up to 14 feet or 4.3 meters in length. That being said, it is thought that the maximum size for the modern version of this species would be about 17 feet, around 5 meters. I say modern version because this species has gone through some serious changes over the last couple hundred years because of humans. In the 19th and 20th centuries, Orinoco crocodiles were hunted to near extinction. There have been protections put on them since the 70s, but even since then, they've had a hard time recovering. Today, it's thought that there are less than 1,500 Orinoco crocodiles left in the wild. An interesting part about this is our hunting of these animals have actually impacted their maximum size. The largest Orinoco crocodile ever was shot in 1800, and it measured over 22 feet or 6.8 meters in length. Unfortunately, because of humanity's greeds, these giants are no longer around today, but hopefully we can help protect and preserve this species for the future. This is one of the most powerful and terrifying dinosaurs ever created, Arx Giganotosaurus. Reaching up to about 70 feet or 21 meters in length, it is an absolutely massive animal, far larger than its real-life counterpart. It is the largest and most powerful dinosaur in the game, only beaten by titanosaurs and the bosses. Aside from sheer size, they have a few abilities that put them ahead of the pack. Thanks to their blade-like teeth, they're granted an ability known as Gnash, which allows them to cause bleeding damage over time. Even if you manage to do significant damage, it can often trigger their rage mode. In this state, their attacks are much more powerful and destructive, and they can't tell the difference between friend and foe. These monsters have no natural predators on the island and will often just roam around killing indiscriminately. And you'd think because of how large it is, it'd be a relatively slow creature, but no, it's pretty fast, and I'm sure you know that if you've seen these videos. All in all, this is the most terrifying version of Giganotosaurus. Just in case you hadn't heard yet, the Irwins have done it again. For the first time, the Irwins and the amazing people that they worked with have been able to hatch an Irwin's turtle in captivity. While that's a pretty big achievement in itself, the turtle actually holds a special place in the hearts of Australia Zoo. In 1990, Steve, along with his father Bob, were out trying to capture some crocodiles when they accidentally caught this turtle. Steve had never seen this turtle before, so he made sure to take some pictures before releasing it back into the wild, only to be confirmed later that it was indeed a new species. The turtle was then named after Steve Irwin, now called Irwin's turtles. As of right now, we don't know a ton about this species because we haven't observed it that much in the wild. But hopefully, through the efforts of conservationists and scientists like Robert Irwin and his family, we can learn more and more about these brilliant animals.
Keep in mind, we're talking about a whole bird here, and birds are reptiles, so imagine if your bearded dragon could use his words.
I recently saw this video, and a lot of people in his comment section seemed genuinely surprised that birds are reptiles.
Allow me to shed some light on the subject.
I know it seems relatively confusing, but it's actually pretty straightforward. You may have heard by now that birds and dinosaurs are related. Not only are they related, but we've actually found out that birds themselves are dinosaurs. Not just descended and not just closely related, but in fact true dinosaurs themselves. Dinosaurs are part of a group known as Archosaurian reptiles alongside crocodilians and pterosaurs, which would then classify birds under Archosaurian reptiles as well. So, in short, yeah, birds are reptiles. This, in my opinion, is one of the most terrifying creatures that ever lived. This is Hatzegopteryx, the largest pterosaur that ever lived that we know of. Standing at 18 feet or 5.5 meters, they're as tall as a giraffe with a wingspan of up to 36 feet or 11 meters. Compared to other members of its family like Quetzalcoatlus, it was an incredibly robust and heavily built animal. Its neck and head were incredibly robust and powerful, and that's because of what it hunted. They were the apex predators of a place known as Hateg Island, where many dwarf animals lived. Their powerful head and neck would be used to spear and pierce through any prey that they could find. Where most pterosaurs are thought to go after relatively small prey, Hatzegopteryx was thought to have hunted relatively large ones, meaning for them, almost anything was on the menu. So be thankful that these terrifying pterosaurs aren't around today, because we'd definitely be a part of that menu. I've noticed that many younger folks don't seem to know who this man is and why so many people in my generation love him so much. This is Steve Irwin, a dedicated conservationist who had an incredible passion for animals. Many folks from my generation began to love him due to his work in the show The Crocodile Hunter. In his show, Steve encountered all types of animals, from snakes to spiders to crocodiles to birds to koalas. And while many of these animals are dangerous, and Steve made certain that everyone knew these animals were dangerous, he would still work with them and show how much he loved and cared for them. His passion and charisma were absolutely contagious, and he inspired many people all across the world to help animals wherever they could. He will go down as one of the greatest conservationists of all time, and today his legacy is carried on by his family. Everyone loves Steve Irwin, but let's not forget his living relatives who still do an incredible amount for conservation. His widow, Terry, his son, Robert, his daughter, Bindi, his granddaughter, Grace, and his son-in-law, Chandler, some of the greatest wildlife warriors of our time. This is the piranha with wings, one of the most terrifying creatures from Peter Jackson's King Kong. Their name is Lividu vespa, and they are much more dangerous than you would expect. Their bodies could reach up to 8 feet or 2.5 meters in length, with a wingspan of up to 11 feet or 3.3 meters. Like many wasps, these guys live in hives serving a queen. Their queen is absolutely enormous, reaching up to 30 feet or 9.1 meters in length. These wasps serve their queen and her brood by bringing them fresh meat. Like all wasps, these guys emit pheromones to communicate with other members of their species. When they do find prey, they use their pheromones to call over other wasps and swarm over it like, you guessed it, a pack of piranhas. An absolutely horrifying creature, and if you want more horrifying creatures just in time for Halloween, make sure to check out my full-length video here. You may not have seen this bird before, but I almost guarantee that you've heard its call. This is a kookaburra, specifically a laughing kookaburra. Their calls are an extremely popular sound used in various pieces of media, from movies to music to TV. They're not very large birds, growing to a maximum of about 19 inches or 47 centimeters. Despite this relatively small size, they're actually still the largest of their family, the kingfishers. Instead of fish, however, kookaburra hunt other animals, including reptiles and rodents, and they've even been known to tackle venomous snakes. Their calls are most often used as a warning, usually to establish territory or defend their mates. They're usually not aggressive towards humans, and some have even been known to let people rub their bellies, but they have been known to snatch food out of people's hands unexpectedly. They are some of the most vocal and interesting birds in the entire world. Peter Jackson's King Kong introduced us to one of the most unsettling monsters in any form of media. This is Carnictus, a massive and monstrous worm. They evolved from parasitic flatworms that lived in the guts of carnivorous dinosaurs, like tapeworms. Over millions of years of evolution, they have become absolutely massive monsters, reaching up to 13 feet or 4 meters in length. One of the most terrifying parts of this animal is its dangerous, razor-sharp mouth with cone-shaped teeth. They were relatively slow-moving predators, so these cone-shaped teeth would help them hold on to any and all prey before it could get away. They're an absolutely unsettling and disgusting creature, and if you want to learn more about them and the other creepy crawlies on Skull Island, make sure to check out this video here. Did you know that Bindi Irwin, Steve Irwin's daughter, was actually named after two of Steve's favorite animals? The first of these was a female crocodile named Bindi.
Is Bindi? By crikey, she's a gnarly little Sheila.
Bindi was Steve's favorite female crocodile and had a lot of attitude and personality, according to Steve. Bindi is also known to be one of Australia Zoo's best crocodile mothers and will voraciously defend her nest. She was caught in the 1980s by Steve, and he fell in love with her ever since. Bindi's middle name, Sue, comes from Steve's best friend. If you've ever watched any of the earlier Crocodile Hunter content, then you've definitely seen this very good girl, Suey. Suey was, in Steve's own words, his best girl. She accompanied Steve on many of his adventures, and according to him, she loved it. Bindi Irwin herself is an absolute legend, and it's no surprise seeing as she's named after two other amazing legends. This is Mama Scarface, a massive and powerful T-Rex from 2008's Turok. And when I say massive, I mean massive. This absolute monster could grow up to 100 feet or 30 meters in length with a height of about 12 meters or 40 feet. She's so large and powerful that small arms fire seems to not do very much to her whatsoever. She appears several times throughout the story, accidentally saving you as well as trying to eat you and your companions. At one point, you find her nest where you have to confront and kill her offspring. Her very final appearance is at the end of the game, where she finds and confronts Turok for the last time. Here, her size and power are put on full display as she attempts to do everything in her power to kill the player. Thanks to his skill and quite a bit of luck, Turok manages to bring down Mama Scarface and eventually shove a grenade into her eye, finally killing her. Before she died, she proved she was one of the most terrifying dinosaurs in any video game. This is one of the most menacing creatures from the insect pit in 2005's King Kong. Sometimes known as the Reapers, these are Deplectors. They were gigantic crustaceans reaching up to 8 feet or 2.5 meters in length. And they also boast incredibly long arms, which could reach 6 feet or 1.8 meters in and of themselves. And they also come equipped with extraordinarily long antennae. Deplectors are essentially blind, so they use these antennae to tell when there's prey just outside their cave. Using a glue-like substance, they'll launch their entire body out of the cave to capture whatever they feel with their antennae. They are terrifying predators who will make short work of anyone who comes near their cave, and if you want to learn more about them and the other creatures on Skull Island, make sure to check out this video here. That is a pheasant cockle, a species of cuckoo from Australia, New Guinea, and Timor. As I mentioned, they're a species of cuckoo, but unlike the rest of their family, they don't parasitize other birds. Instead, they're relatively good parents, and they take care of their young themselves. They have relatively short, rounded wings, and that's because they spend a lot of their time on the ground. And don't get me wrong, they can fly, but just not very well compared to other birds. Instead, they spend most of their time prowling through the undergrowth in search of lizards, mammals, and even other birds. And they're relatively large as far as birds go, reaching up to 28 inches or about 70 centimeters in length. And in my opinion, they have some incredibly intriguing looking plumage. So I guess there's one cuckoo who isn't really all that cuckoo. In the spirit of Halloween, let's talk about one of the weirdest dinosaur horror movies that I've ever seen. This is Carnosaur, released in the summer of 1993, the same year as Jurassic Park. The story focuses on the citizens of a small town as they try to deal with a crazy scientist who's trying to wipe out humanity. The crazy scientist, Dr. Tiptree, tries to accomplish this by creating an airborne disease that infects women with dinosaur embryos. Like I said, this movie is absolutely bonkers. She was able to create this disease through experiments on genetically modified chickens, which also happened to create a Deinonychus at one point. The Deinonychus is one of the main antagonists of the film and terrorizes and kills many of the citizens in the town. Though it is revealed that Tiptree created a full-grown T-Rex at some point, though they never exactly make it clear how or where she got it. Thankfully, her insanity gets the better of her, and Tiptree ends up succumbing to the disease she created. There's a lot I could say about this movie or its many sequels, but all I'll say for now is it's an absolutely wild time. This is the Lightning Claw, a megaraptorid from Australia. It was discovered in a place known as Lightning Ridge, which is where it got its name. It's currently known as Lightning Claw because the specimen hasn't been fully described. And despite its incredibly unique nickname, it may actually represent a synonym to another already discovered species. We know that the Lightning Claw specimen was most likely a megaraptorid, which points to its identity being Rapator. Rapator is a poorly understood megaraptorid due to the incredibly fragmentary nature of its original remains. If the Lightning Claw does prove to be a Rapator, it would give us a much clearer understanding of this species. If this proves to be the case, Rapator would be the largest predatory dinosaur ever discovered in Australia, between 7 and 9 meters or 23 to 30 feet. With a build that size coupled with their powerful claws, this would be one predator that hits as hard as lightning. These are the largest theropod dinosaurs that we know of from each continent. First up is Antarctica, with Cryolophosaurus reaching 7 meters or 23 feet in length, or about 1,000 pounds or 450 kilograms. Next up, we've got Australia. Officially, it's Australovenator at 6 meters or about 20 feet in length and 1,100 pounds or about 500 kilograms. Next up is Europe, with the species of Torvosaurus reaching up to 11 meters or 36 feet in length and weighing up to 5 tons. For Asia, this one might surprise you, but it's Deinonychus reaching up to 36 feet or 11 meters meters in length and weighing upwards of 7 tons. Next up, in Africa, we've got Spinosaurus, reaching up to 46 feet or 14 meters in length and weighing a massive 8 tons. In South America, we have Giganotosaurus, reaching up to 13 meters or 43 feet in length and weighing around 9 tons. Last but not least, in North America, we have Tyrannosaurus rex, reaching up to 13 meters or 43 feet in length and weighing upwards of 10 tons. And those are the largest theropod dinosaurs from every continent that we know of. This is the Cruel Claw, one of the most ferocious monsters out there, Odogaron. These are some of the most on-site monsters in the game, and they'll attack basically anything. With no sense of self-preservation and an excellent sense of smell, Odogaron will seek out and attack anything in its environment, even monsters larger and more powerful than itself. They can reach up to 57 feet, just over 17 meters in length, and what they lack in size they make up for in aggression and determination. One of Odogaron's most notable traits is its terrifying claws. Each foot has a total of 10 claws, 4 that are always visible and 6 that are retractable. All of their claws come with a set of jagged spikes lining them, mentally deep and visceral wounds on their prey. Even if the prey manages to escape, Odogaron can track them down using the scent of their blood. And it doesn't matter if you're bigger, stronger, weaker, or smaller than Odogaron, his hands are rated E for everyone. This is one of the largest eagles in the world. Standing around 3.5 feet tall, just over a meter, with a wingspan upwards of 7 feet, about 2.1 meters, this is the Philippine eagle. Weighing up to 8 kilograms, just shy of 18 pounds, these guys are the 3rd largest eagle in the entire world. They're such powerful animals that in the Philippines they can take on almost any form of prey, from the monkeys to the deer. Unfortunately, this species is still critically endangered. The primary cause of their decline is deforestation, which makes it much more difficult for them to raise their young. Poaching has been a large part of their decline and has often hampered reintroduction projects. As of today, there's thought to be only 200 to 600 Philippines eagles left in the wild. So hopefully we can come together to protect these amazing and powerful birds. This is the Dragon of Death, the largest known pterosaur from South America. Meet Thanatos dracan, a powerful and terrifying Asdarchid pterosaur. These absolutely massive animals had a wingspan up to 30 feet or 9 meters in length. It's closely related to the North American Quetzalcoatlus, and in fact, it's the oldest of the Quetzalcoatlini. Based on what we can tell, they would have been one of the top predators in their environment about 90 million years ago. They lived in a landscape absolutely dominated by sauropods, and they would have had plentiful food because of this. Whether it was hunting the younger sauropods or scavenging off the corpses of the adults, Thanatos dracan would have been adept at both. Even with all the sauropods around, none of the other animals would have been any safer. They'd all have to keep one eye on the sky to look out for the Dragon of Death. This is Gastornis, traditionally thought to be one of the mighty terror birds. Standing at over 6.5 feet or 2 meters tall and weighing 175 kilograms or 385 pounds, they are massive animals. They have an incredibly thick and powerful skull, and because of this, in the past, they were thought to be a carnivore like the other terror birds. However, study of their calcium isotopes show us that they had no meat in their diet at all and were indeed herbivorous. Other studies have showed that they're not terror birds at all, but are rather large, flightless anseriforms or waterfowl. Gastornis first rose in Europe around 60 million years ago when it was still an island continent. From here, they began to spread, eventually establishing a population in Asia, and then again eventually establishing a population in North America. And they seem to be doing rather successfully, actually, until they disappeared from the fossil record about 40 million years ago. But either way, it was probably the friendliest terror bird that you'd know. This man was almost like the Steve Irwin of dinosaurs when I was a kid. This is none other than conservationist and naturalist Nigel Marven. After graduating the University of Bristol, he began to work on wildlife documentaries with BBC. Like Steve Irwin, Nigel had a very hands-on approach to presenting wildlife, which made him incredibly popular. But if you're on my page, there's a good chance you know him for his most famous work presenting the special episodes of Walking with Dinosaurs. It was so successful that they went on to give him his own show, Prehistoric Park, and he also had a nice little cameo in a British TV show called Primeval, where he plays himself before he gets eaten. His work in these shows inspired many folks' love of our prehistoric past. To this day, he still makes amazing documentaries and shows to teach people all around the world about the wonder of animals. He is truly a legendary scientist. Toucans are some of the most vibrantly colored birds in the entire animal kingdom. Despite their relative popularity, I don't think a lot of people know very much about them. One really important thing to note is that when most people think of a toucan, they think of this bird here. But this isn't the only toucan. In fact, there's over 40 species of toucan spread over 5 different genera. This species, the toko toucan and its family, are considered the typical toucans. Next up are the green toucanets, including animals like the emerald toucanet. Then you've got the dichromatic toucanets, including animals like the yellow-eared toucanet. Then you've got the mountain toucans, who are kind of like the goth kids in the family, especially the gray-breasted mountain toucan. And last, but certainly not least, we have the Araucaris toucans, which include some of the smallest species of toucan like the lettered Araucari. As you can see, toucans are a very diverse group that come in many shapes, sizes, and colors. Which one's your favorite? Let me know in the comments below. Did you know that Carnotaurus was one of the fastest carnivorous dinosaurs? Carnotaurus is one of the largest abelisaurids, reaching up to 26 feet, about 8 meters in length, and weighing around 1.5 tons. Certainly not light, but definitely lighter than you'd expect a 30-foot predator to be. But that's mainly because Carnotaurus was built to be a pursuit predator. It was discovered in the late 90s that Carnotaurus thigh bones were heavily resistant to the normal bending that would occur during running. Aside from that, other evidence can be found in Carnotaurus's tail. One of the most important movement muscles on all dinosaurs, the cauda femoralis, is located here at the tail, which attaches to the thighs. By reducing the size of other muscles, Carnotaurus would have had one of the largest cauda femoralis muscles of any dinosaur. This would make Carnotaurus one of the fastest known theropod dinosaurs, reaching up to 35 miles per hour, about 56 kilometers per hour. However, the reduced muscles make turning much more difficult, which means Carnotaurus would not have been capable of sharp and quick turns. Regardless, that sheer speed alone is impressive. Today, November 15th, is Steve Irwin Day, so let's talk about some of the most fun facts about our favorite crocodile hunter. Firstly, November 15th is Steve Irwin Day because it's the birthday of one of his favorite animals, a Galapagos tortoise named Harriet. In 2003, he ended up rescuing a scuba diver while he was in California filming sea lions for a new documentary. Steve was very true to his word and bought hundreds of thousands of acres of land to protect and preserve the wildlife there. Steve saved hundreds, if not thousands, of animals by either relocating them or giving them a second chance at his park. He taught many people that even the scariest, biggest, and most monstrous-looking animals still deserve our love and respect. Even if he's gone, that legacy and dream is still carried out in earnest by his family, some of the greatest wildlife warriors of our time. Happy Steve Irwin Day, everybody! So a lot of people have asked me, what made the dinosaurs go extinct? Most people point towards the meteor or the asteroid that hit the Earth. But in truth, it was far more horrifying. What really drove the dinosaurs to extinction was this beast here, Queso. Legends say he fell from the sky in a great ball of fire, which is where the myth of the meteor comes from. After landing, he went on to consume every land-based animal he could get his hands on, except for small mammals because they were either too fast or too small for him to care. Afterwards, he dove into the sea where he ate so much marine life that the pterosaurs went extinct. Because he couldn't catch the birds, they were the only dinosaurs who survived, and afterwards Queso went into hibernation. After millions of years, he is now awoken from his slumber, ready to come back for the remainder of the dinosaurs.
Yeah, we eating good now, baby! Oh man, I'm sorry, look. Yeah!
Alright, I've seen about 3 different viral videos using this sound, so let's talk about it real quick. From what I can tell, the original video claims that this sound is from Sandia National Laboratories. But the issue is, Sandia National Laboratories has never done a study on T-Rex vocals. The only published study that Sandia National Laboratories ever did on dinosaur sounds was a 1997 study of Parasaurolophus. And as far as I'm aware, this alleged T-Rex sound doesn't come from any other reputable source. Now, with that being said, is this sound more accurate than the Jurassic Park version of the roar? Based on what we know about dinosaurs currently, I would say it's more accurate than the Jurassic Park roar, but there's no published study and no science was actually used to get this sound. And unless a study comes out supporting this, we shouldn't be saying this is what T-Rex actually sounded like.
Nighttime! Daytime! Nighttime! Daytime!
That funny and adorable little bird is known as a black heron. These guys can be found all over Africa and Madagascar, usually on the eastern side, but they can be found as far north as Greece and Italy. They're not very tall, standing just over 2 feet at 26 inches or 66 centimeters tall. Like a majority of herons, they spend a significant amount of time in and around the water to hunt, but unlike the rest of their family, they do it a little bit differently. Most herons are patient ambush predators and will stand relatively still and wait for prey to come to them. Instead, the black heron employs something known as canopy fishing. As shown at the beginning of the video, it folds its wings sort of like an umbrella and sticks its head underneath. With the extremely hot temperatures in Africa, this creates shade over the water, which ends up attracting fish and other aquatic life. And it shows us just how smart and creative a variety of birds can be. Absolutely brilliant. So a lot of people have asked me, if marine reptiles aren't dinosaurs, then what are they? Well, it depends on what marine reptiles you're talking about. The easiest of these to classify are the ever-famous mosasaurs. Mosasaurs are part of the group known as Squamata, which means their closest relatives are snakes and lizards. You can kind of think of them as aquatic monitor lizards. The other three major groups of aquatic reptiles are a little more complicated. Plesiosaurs, pliosaurs, and most of their relatives can be classified under Sauropterygia, which would make their closest living relatives turtles. Now, they're only distantly related, but they're more closely related than turtles are to lizards and snakes. Finally, the last major group are the ichthyosaurs. They are the most ancient of the marine reptile species, spanning over 250 million years old. They were fairly unique animals and not closely related to any living reptiles today, with the closest still being turtles. So in short, no, they're not dinosaurs. Today is Thanksgiving in the United States, and pilgrims are often talked about, but do you know about the original American pilgrims? About 2.7 million years ago, the Isthmus of Panama rose out of the sea and connected North and South America for the first time in millions of years. This is known as the Great American Interchange. It's called such because animals from both continents migrated to the other. North America ended up having creatures like ground sloths and terror birds, while South America took on animals like saber-toothed cats and bears. It was long thought that a large portion of South America's native species went extinct because of this interchange. Nowadays, it's believed that only one group was driven to extinction by it, the notoungulates. The descendants from these migrating animals can be seen today in both North and South America. In North America, animals like porcupines, armadillos, and possums can trace their origins back to South America. And the reverse is true for South America, with animals like jaguars, tapirs, and deer. It was certainly one of the most interesting parts of our planet's amazing history. This is the largest elephant that we know of and possibly the largest land mammal of all time. Meet the mighty Paleoloxodon. With over 10 different species assigned to this genus, they have some of the largest and smallest elephants of all time. The larger ones can reach up to 13 feet or 4 meters tall and weigh more than 12 tons, which is heavier than a T-Rex. But the size estimate on the largest species, P. nemidicus, kind of puts all the others to shame. If the estimates are correct, it would reach up to 17 feet or 5.2 meters tall and weigh more than 20 tons. Unfortunately, this size is still speculative, so we don't know for sure. In contrast to that behemoth, P. falconeri, one of the smallest species, would only reach about a meter or just over 3 feet tall and weigh no more than about 500 pounds. Like many elephants, Paleoloxodon can trace its origin all the way back to Africa around 4 million years ago, before they began to spread out and diversify. Before going extinct, they had spread all over the eastern half of the world, originating in Africa before spreading to Europe and Asia. Absolutely magnificent beasts. This is a powerful and ancient fossil Pokemon known as none other than Tyrantrum. In-game, Tyrantrum and its first form, Tyrant, went extinct about 100 million years ago. But like many of the fossil Pokemon, thanks to fossil scientists, they've come back once again. Tyrant starts out pretty small, at about 2 feet or 0.8 meters tall. Tyrant often acts like a spoiled child, throwing temper tantrums whenever they encounter something they don't like. Even at a small size, its jaws and body are incredibly powerful and it can often end up accidentally hurting people. Tyrantrum, meanwhile, is much bigger, standing at around 8 feet or 2.5 meters tall. It has incredibly powerful jaws, just as capable of shredding metal as bone. It is covered in a multitude of bony or keratinous ridges, as well as some sparse feathering. The process that revives them can change them as well, and it's thought that the original Tyrantrum was completely covered in feathers. These guys are easily one of my top 10 favorite Pokemon. By now, many of you have heard of Jeremy Wade and his show River Monsters. It followed Mr. Wade as he traveled all across the world catching legendary riverfish everywhere he went. Despite the show's name, the animals weren't actually treated like monsters. Early on in the episodes, they would often talk about all the horror stories that came alongside these animals. But oftentimes, by the end of the episode, Jeremy has made it clear that these animals aren't really out there to hurt or hunt humans. In my opinion, he does an excellent job of putting our fears aside and showing us that what we thought isn't actually true. At the time, many of the creatures he caught on his show were poorly understood. He brought many of these creatures into the public eye so that we could understand and protect them, such as the alligator gar. Oh, and the only reason the show was canceled in the first place was because Jeremy had caught almost every large freshwater fish that exists on the planet that we know of. Probably the most legendary fisherman of our time. This is the largest and likely most dangerous owl in history that we know of. Meet Ornitomegalonyx, the giant running owl. They're estimated to be over 3.5 feet tall, about 1.1 meters. Though they aren't super closely related, they look very similar to a giant version of modern burrowing owls. They had incredibly long legs and a rather short tail, but unlike burrowing owls, they're fairly bulky. Their legs are incredibly powerful and well built, suggesting they spent a lot of time on the ground. They lived in what is modern-day Cuba and would have mainly hunted rodents, some of which could reach the size of capybara. It is also thought that they would have been capable of hunting the giant ground sloths of Cuba as well, some of which could reach the size of a black bear. They were ambush hunters and would have used their powerful talons to target their prey's vital areas, like their skulls. They're incredibly powerful, beautiful, and terrifying animals, and I'm surprised they're not talked about more. This is a living natural disaster, one of the most powerful elder dragons in Monster Hunter, a Latreon. These brutes are able to use 5 different elements in their attacks: fire, water, ice, thunder, and dragon. It can use all 5 elements at the same time, but it doesn't have complete control over it, which often causes it to destroy its surroundings. The Latreon is capable of using the abilities of all the other elder dragons, but because of its instability, it can't harness that power fully. Its sharp, backward-facing scales are what produce its elemental power. It uses these massive horns to control and focus that power. Latreon's main abilities, fire, ice, and dragon, are its most powerful and most often used. When using and transitioning between one of these 3 as its main focus, it builds up an insane amount of elemental energy, which it can then use in a massive burst. This attack, known as Eschaton Judgment, combines all 5 of their elemental powers and destroys anything nearby. A living, breathing, natural disaster. Did you know that there's a raptor that might be bigger than Utah Raptor? At the end of 2022, new material from Uzbekistan shows us possibly the largest dromaeosaurid of all time. This animal has no official name yet, so it's currently known as the Besekti Giant. If the estimates are correct, this monster would reach up to 2,100 pounds, around 950 kilograms, just over a ton. That would make them almost double the weight of Utah Raptor, which is thought to be around 1,000 pounds or 450 kilograms. A rough estimate puts them at about 7 meters or 23 feet in length as well. But it's very important to note that there's been no official description yet, and this is all subject to change. The fossil is incredibly fragmentary, and there hasn't been a lot of material discovered for it at all. So while it's definitely a possibility that it could be the largest, as of right now, Utah Raptor still holds that title. But hopefully new material and an official description will help clear up any of this confusion, and possibly show us the true largest raptor of all time. These little monsters look inconspicuous, but they're actually terrifying predators. Normally, they're called shrikes, but sometimes these birds are known as butcher birds. These little carnivores aren't very large, but the males have some terrifying habits. Even though they're not very closely related, they have hooked, pointed beaks very similar to birds of prey like hawks and eagles. After catching their prey, these little monsters take them back to thorns or spikes to impale them. They aren't picky about the spikes either and will even use barbed wire fences. They do this for a few reasons. The first, being the most obvious, is to save the food for later. Aside from that, some of the insects they eat can be toxic, and impaling them can actually break down the toxins. They also impale their prey to both attract mates and deter rivals. They seem to be a rather territorial bird overall. With their incredibly macabre way of dealing with prey, they definitely earned their name, the butcher bird. These are 2 of the most legendary zoologists of our lifetime. Meet Chris and Martin Kratt. Folks in my generation will most likely remember them from Zaboomafoo, a show where they hosted with a talking lemur named Zaboomafoo. In the show, the brothers and their lemur friend inspired a passion and love for animals in children all over the world. And they found a way to make it fun and entertaining for children to want to learn. While I've never seen it, I know a lot of the younger generations know them from the show known as Wild Kratts. The show has been running for over a decade now and has taught kids all over the world small ways to make big impacts to help their wildlife. The brothers have no doubt inspired many new biologists, zoologists, and similar over the years. In fact, their impact has been so amazing that in 2017, a mantis was named after them. They are truly amazing people, and between them and Zaboomafoo, loving animals at an early age was easy for a lot of us. And hopefully they'll keep inspiring people for generations to come. You know, there's one dinosaur that I feel doesn't get a lot of credit, and it should, because it's a very interesting animal. That dinosaur would be a Margosaurus, a relatively small sauropod with very long spines on its neck. I know I said that they're small, but they're only relatively small compared to other sauropods. They're estimated to be between 9 and 13 meters, about 30 to 43 feet, and weighing around 4 tons. But by far their most interesting feature are these backward-facing spines. Over the years, there's been a lot of theories about what those spines were and what they were used for. For the longest time, it was thought that these spines were covered in a keratin sheath, very similar to horns on animals like Carnotaurus. However, a 2022 study looked in depth at the spines and showed us they were more than likely covered in skin like a sail, meaning that defense probably wasn't these spines' first function, if it was one of their functions at all. It really exemplifies how many mysteries are still left surrounding dinosaurs, even ones that we discovered in the 80s and before. Absolutely brilliant. A new Jurassic Park game was just announced. It's called Jurassic Park Survival, and it's an upcoming action horror game by Saber Interactive. The game takes place allegedly just one day after the Jurassic Park incident. We'll be following a new character, Dr. Maya Joshi, as she's stranded on the island and left behind by herself. Based on what we can tell, this game will emphasize stealth, strategy, and intelligence rather than outright combat. Almost like Alien Isolation, but with dinosaurs instead of aliens. The trailer looks absolutely stunning, and even the pre-game alpha footage looks amazing. This is the type of game Jurassic Park fans like myself have been waiting for years. I'm gonna pick up this game as soon as it drops, and I'm so very excited. There's been no official release date yet, unfortunately, but hopefully we'll get one of those soon. Jurassic Park fans, we about to be eating good, baby! What's the difference between a raptor and a megaraptor? I've noticed that some people confuse megaraptors for dromaeosaurs, the animals that we typically call raptors. They were confused because when fossils were first discovered in the 1990s for animals like megaraptor, their big hand claws were confused for foot claws. However, by the early 2000s, we discovered that megaraptors were not, in fact, related to dromaeosaurs, at least not that closely related. Dromaeosaurs were part of a group known as Maniraptora, which themselves were part of a group known as Coelurosaurians. Nowadays, it is thought that megaraptors were also Coelurosaurians, but much more basal along the lineage. Megaraptors' exact placement is a little bit funky because some people claim that they're closer related to animals like tyrannosaurs, while others claim they're incredibly basal Coelurosaurians. Whatever the case, megaraptors are not actually raptors as we know them, and it's a case of mistaken identity. I hope that helped clarify some things. These are the closest living relatives of the mighty terror birds. These birds are known as Seriema, and they're native to South America, much like the terror birds of old. They're not as large as their extinct cousins, reaching about 90 centimeters, just shy of 3 feet tall. Seriemas are the only surviving Karyama forms, making them the closest living relatives to terror birds and several other large flightless birds. While they are capable of flight, they usually stick to walking, prowling open grasslands in search of prey. They're like the South American equivalent of the African secretary bird. Like secretary and terror birds, Seriemas are carnivores. Terror birds use their powerful and massive beak to hunt. Secretary birds use a rapid kicking method, but what do Seriemas do? Apparently, Seriemas throw their prey against rocks or other hard surfaces to break their bones. Oh, and if the prey's too large, it'll use a very raptor-like claw to tear them apart. Yes, you heard that right. They basically have a non-flexible raptor claw on their foot. These guys would be terrifying if they were much larger. These are 3 horrifying ways prehistoric animals could end you. First up, you've got getting run down. When most people think of predatory pterosaurs, they think of an animal sweeping down and snatching a small creature off the ground. But not these guys, as darkids like Quetzalcoatlus were primarily thought to hunt on the ground, where they'd still be able to run up to 20 miles or 31 kilometers per hour, making nowhere safe from them. If you've ever been afraid of the ocean, that's not about to change, because next up we've got ripped apart. This guy is known as a sea scorpion, specifically Jaekelopterus. Reaching upwards of 8 feet, they would have been one of the dominant predators in their sea, using those pincers to rip their prey apart. They're arthropods, so it's essentially like being attacked by a giant predatory crab. But for the scariest creature on this list, you might still be alive while it eats you. Megalania, the giant cousin of Komodo dragons, could reach up to 20 feet or 6 meters. Today, Komodo dragons can swallow a surprisingly large animal whole. Megalania, being around double the size of Komodos, could have easily done the same to us. Absolutely chilling. This man is an underrated legend. If you grew up in my generation, you know that this is none other than the man, the myth, the legend, Jeff Corwin. Since 1984, Corwin was heavily involved in conservation, starting with the rainforests in Central and South America. Shortly afterwards, he began his work on TV, teaching folks all over the world about animals. And in 1997, that earned him his own Disney Channel show, Going Wild with Jeff Corwin. But it was his following show, The Jeff Corwin Experience, that solidified his presence in the minds of people all over the world. It wasn't just educational, but the show was also fun because Jeff consistently made jokes and references throughout. Even today, much like the Krat brothers, Corwin consistently makes educational content about animals and nature. I, for one, am thankful for everything this legend has taught me. Carnosaur is a completely insane movie, but did you know that it's based off a book that's even more insane? Written by John Brosnan in 1984, the novel follows David Pascal, a reporter investigating mysterious animal attacks in England. A rich man named Darren Penward has a private zoo, and it's thought that one of his tigers escaped. Pascal eventually finds a survivor from one of the attacks who tells him it's not a tiger, but a dinosaur. He ends up seducing Penward's wife, who shows him that the zoo is not just modern animals, but filled with dinosaurs. This was allegedly achieved by restructuring chicken DNA. Penward believes that a third world war is coming and plans to release all the dinosaurs into the wild post-war. While escaping, the pair run into Pascal's ex Jenny, another reporter, and in a fit of jealous rage, Miss Penward releases all the dinosaurs when he insists on helping her. What follows is absolute chaos as the dinosaurs go on a rampage throughout England. Some of the dinosaurs include Tarbosaurus, Altospinax, and of course, Deinonychus. The novel is much different from the book, and I highly recommend that you check it out for yourself. These are the remains of an enormous sea monster. In 2022, fossil hunter Philip Jacobs discovered a snout on the coast of Dorset, England. He returned to the site later with paleontologist Steve Etches, and together the two of them found and excavated the remainder of the skull. The skull was absolutely massive, measuring around 6.5 feet, nearly 2 meters long. According to the paleontologist, there are no missing bones, which would make this the most complete pliosaur skull ever found. Because of how well preserved it is, Etches believes that the rest of the fossil is still somewhere along Dorset's coast, and he hopes to find it soon. As of right now, we're not entirely sure what the identity of this species is, but it very well could be one of the already known pliosaur species. With the size of its skull, I'd estimate that this animal is probably around 40 feet or 12 meters long at maximum. If this skull isn't from one of the already known species, this would make this new specimen one of the largest pliosaurs ever discovered. It is an important and amazing discovery, and I sincerely hope that Etches finds the rest of the specimen. Let's wish them some luck, lads. Allosaurus is one of the most famous carnivorous dinosaurs ever. They were the top predator of the Jurassic, and they're often equated to a lion. But honestly, a honey badger would be a better comparison, because honey badgers don't give a damn. Neither did Allosaurus. These predators seem incredibly aggressive and willing to throw hands with basically anything. They have an incredibly high amount of paleopathologies, which are injuries that we can see in the fossils. One of the most famous Allosauruses, Big Al, had over 14 separate injuries on his fossils. Not to mention the one Allosaurus who got crotch shot by a stegosaur. The strangest part is Allosaurus was able to live through some incredibly traumatic injuries which healed over time. If you want to talk about Black Air Force energy, then Allosaurus is definitely the Jurassic version. Imagine that, a predator with the attitude of a honey badger but the strength and power of an apex predator, and you've got Allosaurus. The Allosaurus, like honey badgers, don't give a damn. One of the most aggressive and impressive carnivores to ever live. Ceratopsians are a group of dinosaurs known for their intricate frills and horns, but none are quite as complex as Cosmoceratops. They're not the biggest ceratopsian by any means, reaching about 15 feet or 4.5 meters long and weighing around 1.2 tons. But what they lack in size, they make up for in intricacy. Their brow horns don't face forward, rather they face to the side, kind of like a bison. Its nasal horn also isn't very pointed or large and is very far back on its snout. But these horns, known as epiossifications, are probably the most complex and form sort of a crown on Cosmoceratops. Rather than pointing up and outwards like Triceratops, the epiossifications of Cosmoceratops kind of point downward, sort of like a flower petal. Cosmoceratops isn't particularly well adapted to combat like other ceratopsians, so its frill was most likely used for mating. They're more of a lover, not a fighter. Did you know that there used to be hippos in Europe? Yes, you heard that right. Not only were there extinct hippo species in Europe, but they were also quite a bit larger than the modern hippo. Imagine a modern hippo. Now imagine it twice that size. These behemoths could be 9,300 pounds or 4,200 kilograms, just shy of 5 tons. That's more than double the weight of the modern hippo. I can already tell this is going to be Casual Geographic's worst nightmare. These animals first appeared in Italy and Greece around 2 million years ago before they began to spread throughout the rest of Europe. Aside from Italy and Greece, specimens of these animals can be found in France, Germany, Britain, and the Netherlands. It has been suggested that this species is much more aquatic than their modern-day counterpart. Regardless if they were more aquatic or not, these animals would have been incredibly dangerous towards any predators that would have dared attack them, which does include humans. As the climate got colder in Europe, it was thought that these animals died out around 400,000 years ago. So now we can only wonder, what if? One of Monster Hunter's most infamous, this is Diablos. Famed for their aggression, these monsters can reach up to 100 feet or 30 meters in length. They are extremely territorial monsters and will not share their territory with anything except elder dragons and certain more powerful monsters. Despite those teeth and their high levels of aggression, they're actually herbivores. In fact, their favorite food is giant cacti. If you look at Diablos, you can actually see that it has quite a few herbivore features. They come equipped with a massive, powerful set of horns, as well as a clubbed tail like Ankylosaurus. Those horns combined with their dense musculature allows Diablos to rapidly dig. They use their underground advantage to surprise attack foes or to slip away from a particularly dangerous fight. Even though they're herbivores, unless you're an elder dragon, get ready to throw hands the second this monster lays eyes on you. Absolutely brilliant. This is the largest Carcharodontosaur from North America that we know of. Meet Acrocanthosaurus, the high-spined lizard. These brutes were massive, reaching up to 38 feet or 11.5 meters long and weighing around 6 to 7 tons. They would have been the dominant predator of their ecosystem with little to no competition from anything else. Fossils of these dinosaurs have been found in Wyoming, Texas, and Oklahoma, suggesting that they had a wide range of environments. This would give them a wide array of prey to choose from as well, including animals like Tenontosaurus. Unlike many other carnivorous dinosaurs, the arms of Acrocanthosaurus aren't useless. Studies of their arms show us that they were incredibly heavily muscled, but not able to bend very far. It's thought that once they captured their prey, they'd use their arms to hold it in place while using their mouth to rip it apart. Or vice versa, holding down the prey with their jaws while using their arms to rip it apart. Acrocanthosaurus is far more terrifying than most people give them credit for. These are 3 horrifying ways prehistoric animals could end you. First up, we've got impaled. Giant Asdarchid pterosaurs like Quetzalcoatlus are absolutely monstrous predators. A good portion of their body size comes from their head, which is equipped with an enormous beak. Like modern water birds, they were likely able to stab with precision, making none of us safe. But a more horrifying end awaits at the water's edge. Like their modern relatives, many giant crocodilians could perform a death roll. If one of those brutes like Deinosuchus got a hold of you, its roll would rip your body apart just from the force. But few ends are as terrifying as our next, which could still potentially happen today. Giant predatory whales such as Leviathan would have been able to hunt using echolocation. Their echolocation would be incredibly loud, and getting hit by one would essentially vibrate your body apart. Getting ended by a sonic blast honestly sounds like one of the worst ways to go. Prehistoric animals are beautifully terrifying. So a lot of people have asked me, what made the dinosaurs go extinct? Most people point towards the meteor or the asteroid that hit the Earth.
Which is literally what happened.
Most people point towards the meteor or the asteroid that hit the Earth. But in truth, it was far more horrifying. What really drove the dinosaurs to extinction was this beast here, Queso.
Is this a
Legends say he fell from the sky in a great ball of fire, which is where the myth of the meteor comes from. After landing, he went on to consume every land-based animal he could get his hands on, except for small mammals because they were either too fast or too small for him to care. Afterwards, he dove into the...
Is this a real video?
Afterwards, he dove into the sea, where he ate so much marine life that the pterosaurs went extinct. Because he couldn't catch the birds, they were the only dinosaurs who survived, and afterwards, Queso went into hibernation. After millions of years, he is now awoken from his slumber, ready to come back for the remainder of the dinosaurs.
Can we eat good now, baby? Oh, man, I'm sorry. Look. Yeah! This dude's name is the DinoFax, but that was completely misinformation. You need to rename your page the Dino Cap.
Mammoths are absolutely massive animals, but I don't think some people realize just how big they are. The largest African elephants can reach around 13 feet or 4 meters tall at the shoulder and weigh around 10 tons. But the largest mammoth species, the steppe mammoth, were significantly larger. They could stand up to 15 feet or 4.5 meters tall and weigh nearly 15 tons. That would put them around the size of 2 average African elephants. Mammoths are incredible and impressive animals, and I feel like in recent years they haven't gotten as much attention as they deserve. So here's your reminder, these are absolute behemoths and are wonderful and brilliant animals. Who knows, maybe these cloning projects go well and we get to see a mammoth during our lifetime. One can only hope.